The story begins with a post as our main character is checking his phone. The post features a review from someone who has left negative feedback about his clinic, while claiming that it is filled with infected COVID-19 patients. After reading this post, most commenters express their unwillingness to visit such a contaminated medical clinic. Meanwhile, our hero, who is reading this post and its comments, finds himself sinking into depression over the fact that his clinic business is failing. COVID-19 has broken out just as he opens his clinic, and after 3 years in the medical field, he can't understand the unfairness of fate, that why does this have to happen to him in this way? He is also depressed that people visiting his clinic get infected, and others are leaving negative comments about it. Suddenly he feels a shift in the world around him, as if the sky is beneath his feet. After a moment he goes blank. With that, his journey from a regular Korean doctor to a divine physician in the novel begins. Now his system is developing in a weird way, as it is allowing our guy to power up, unlock skill, and summon creatures if he boosts his HP. For this purpose, he has to treat his internal organs. His current HP is 0. With that, he opens his eyes and remembers falling into the Han River. He sees a silhouette in front of him and assumes it must be someone who rescued him, even though he has thousands in debt. But he's still relieved to find himself alive. He finally notices that his surroundings and realizes that he's not in a hospital. It feels like he's on the shooting set of a medieval era's show. Suddenly, a very emotional person startles him. When our guy asks about his identity, the person becomes even more emotional, wondering how he could forget his personal doctor named Garden. Our boy, on the other hand, doesn't understand his current situation and asks Garden to bring him a glass of water. The tumbler Garden hands him a luxury glass embedded with diamonds, which makes him wonder if they're real. While drinking the water, he suddenly notices his reflection in the mirror and realizes with dread that it isn't his face which he's looking at. He remembers that this face belongs to the crown prince named Raquiel Adria Magentano, which is a character from The Demon Sword Emperor. That is the novel he was reading the day he went out for a drink. With disbelief at his situation, he thinks he might still be drunk and asks Garden to slap him on the cheek. Horrified at the thought of striking his master, Garden is unable to do it, so our guy slaps himself. The instant he does, he realizes with the excitement of having been given the chance to reincarnate as a crown prince. It means he's left his debt-ridden life behind. With this thought, he starts to rise from his place but promptly collapses. To see him like this, Garden rushes to assist him. Looking at his hand, he realizes that this body is much weaker than a normal 40-year-old's, even though he's a young lad. He realizes with dread that the character he's been given is always bedridden and appears only briefly in the novel. Not only this, he dies at the age of 22. With fear in his heart, he asks Garden about his age, and Garden replies that he's 21. He bites his lip upon hearing this. Before knowing that the character he had been given had that health issue, he was relieved to have left his debt-ridden life behind to enjoy his life as the crown prince. But now, with the dread, he realized that he has only 1 year to live. He thinks about the novel, where the crown prince had died despite receiving the best treatment in the world, and the cleric's blessing. Yet nothing worked in his favor, and he still met his end. While looking in the mirror, he concludes that all of this points to one solution. With that thought in mind, he turns to Garden and asks him to bring as many needles as possible, no matter the size. He's decided to treat himself. After making this decision, he finds himself meditating on his bed. He checks his pulse, aiming to understand the nature of his illness. He tries to concentrate on his 10 strange pulses, where the illness might reside. If one of them shows symptoms, there's a chance he's dealing with an internal injury. At this moment, Garden interrupts him, as he brings the needles he had ordered and laying them down before him. After inspecting them, he picks one up. Seeing him warming up the needle, Garden expresses his curiosity about the purpose of the needle. He haughtily replies that he's going to poke his body with it, leaving poor Garden horrified, who is thinking his master is about to harm himself. He pleads with him not to do it. Our boy tries to calm Garden by saying that he's doing this for a good purpose and asks him to have confidence in this matter, to which Garden reluctantly agrees. With that, he takes off his shirt and lies down on his bed. He knows that he needs to pierce the first needle into his most important breathing organ. To do this, he must calm his breathing. Near his shoulder is the point called Tai-in, which is the lung meridian of the hand. He carefully pokes that spot, while feeling a slight pain due to the needle's thickness. Now he focuses on acupoints, starting with the lung, then moving to cloud gate, and finally upper arm assembly. After completing the first set, he opens his eyes. It seems like he's been granted the skill to perform accurate acupuncture. By applying this technique to his body, he's able to recover his lung a little. With that, a ridiculous scene appears as happily dancing lungs give him 2 thumbs up, resulting in a gain of 100 HP, which is equal to 100 power. Our guy is quite baffled to see the screen in front of him as he reads all of this new information. Our boy is quite curious to see the status window in front of him. Seeing his state, poor Garden thinks that he's gone crazy, so he starts to cry again. With an annoyed expression, our prince orders him not to overreact. Ignoring his emotional doctor, he decides to target another acupoint near the shoulder blade. This acupoint is called the Yunmen acupoint, which he performs perfectly, resulting in alleviated feelings in his chest. He then targets several acupoints in his arms, which hurt more than before, but he endures the pain. Seeing him like this, Garden starts to pray to God for the health of his body and mind. Meanwhile, our guy takes the next step and pokes at the Yunji acupoint as well. With this, he stimulates various acupressure points, and his lungs feel like they're being massaged in a massage chair. He is irritated by the ridiculous notions his screen is displaying, as he is wishing that it would give him some HP points instead. Next, he focuses on the cheesy acupoint, which is located on his palm. With that last nail in the coffin, he successfully performs the acupoint treatment for the left lung meridian. Now his lungs take on a human form and perform a tap dance in his head, which is quite irritating for him. He waits patiently for it to end, but it is continuous for a little longer than his liking. Due to this constant tap dancing out of his lungs, the organ responsible for bowel movement also awakens. Now, the said organ, which is the large intestine, appears as a human and starts to party with the lungs. As their tap dance going on, his large intestine synchronizes with the rhythm of the dance. As a result, it gives him 100 HP, and both of the lungs give him 200 HP each. It means now he has 600 HP. With this increase in his HP, he is now able to activate his skill. His screen asks him whether he would like to shop for some skills. To read it, he remembers all of those fantasy novels in which a skill related to being a warrior or mage is given to the protagonist. So he decides to check it out. Contrary to his expectations, the skills he is shown all relate to medicine and treatment. He thinks that all of the tasks he has done in his past life. To see the list, he decides to choose the pulse reading, which helps him diagnose the illness, which is the foundation of all treatment and prescription if done right. For 500 HP, he purchases this skill with the first stage. By acquiring this skill, he is able to roughly diagnose the health condition of his patients. He later gets the report at the basic overall health check report. To see that, he decides to read his pulse over again. He checks his report, then the system informs him that his body is in the worst condition and he has a minimum of 3 months to live. He thinks it is even shorter than that mobile contract. So, he again concentrates on his treatment through acupressure points. He wonders if inserting a needle in a clockwise direction while twirling it using the reinforcing and reducing method will work. He can breathe out during this process while extracting the needles with respiratory supplementation and a draining method. So he performs it and is amazed to see that his life has extended by 1 day with it. He is so excited that he starts to perform it on another hand as well, which results in him bleeding. Unlike last time, his system warns that he has overdone the acupuncture and recommends that he should do once in every 3 days. Now his organs are shown lying on the floor. He concludes that the patients need to be stable to endure the continuous acupuncture treatment. But his body is quite weak to tolerate such treatment. He then analyzes his situation and concludes that even though the acupuncture treatment is working, with his body's weakened state, he is only able to extend his life for 1 month and then die eventually. After contemplating for a while, he decides that he needs medicine to treat his body. For this purpose, he turns to Garden, who is a doctor in this world. He asks for a more potent ingredient, which makes Garden a little hesitant. He inquires whether they have wolfsbane root, but Garden explains that since they are in his palace, they need to acquire these items from the main palace. He says he will do it, but he wants to know what he plans to do with it. Our guy deadpans that he is going to eat it. Upon hearing this, the poor doctor begs him not to do it. He explains to the doctor that he is just doing it for his own treatment. However, Garden remains reluctant. To reassure him, our boy starts to explain the situation. He asks if Garden is already aware that wolfsbane root is a toxic substance, which Garden confirms as it is used in poison. He adds that he needs the daughter root of the wolfsbane, which is much smaller than normal. At that, Garden deadpans that it can cause his heart to stop. In response to this statement, our boy admits that it is true, but insists that he knows the method he is going to use to turn this tonic into medicine. This sounds bizarre to Garden. Our boy continues, saying that this process is called detoxification, which will help him turn this poison into medicine. He asks whether Garden understands now. Garden honestly replies that he doesn't understand a thing, but he decides to give it a go since it might improve his health. While he goes to the pharmacy to get the root, he thinks about how nothing is stopping the deterioration of his master's health. Now he is willing to place his hope in this new treatment. However, he determines to eat it first to ensure that it is safe for his master to take. After getting the root, our boy is able to make a tonic out of it. But Garden seems quite uncertain upon seeing this strange-looking liquid and comments that it is made from a poisonous substance. Then he starts begging him not to take it. Seeing Garden's pitiful behavior, our boy decides to scare him a little. So he offers Garden to try it out first. This statement brightened Garden's face, because he also wants to try it himself, so he happily agrees to test it. Seeing his eagerness to risk his life for him, our boy is struck with the realization that in the novel, Garden is someone who is too loyal to the Crown Prince. In the beginning, he was not even his doctor and started as an assistant. Though the passage of time sees every doctor who claims to cure him leave, but he remains unwavering. However, he pays the high price of his devotion because in the novel, he is executed after the death of the Crown Prince, accused of causing his death. Looking at him, our boy thinks that he is someone who deserves a good life. But it is another thing to share his tonic with him, which he is not convinced to do. After a while, he finally completes the tonic called Ephedra Aconite Asarum Decoction. Garden is ready to drink it, but our boy stops him, saying that it should be consumed when it is cold. At this moment, Garden suddenly voices his concern about how our boy, the Crown Prince, knows about the recipe for the medicine. Our boy makes an excuse, as he claims that he saw a dream in which a mage told him about this recipe. Despite saying that he believes in our prince, Garden's expression says otherwise. He looks at the time and hurriedly gulps down all of the medicine, leaving the poor doctor completely petrified. He looks at his doctor and with innocent eyes while claiming that he has eaten it all. Suddenly his heart begins beating fast and he realizes that something is about to happen. At that moment, his system informs him that the consumption of the perfectly brewed Ephedra Aconite Asarum decoction results in the reduction of soreness and coldness in his body, as well as a boost to his metabolism. Not only this, but he has also awakened the Azrahan core energy. This term catches his attention. The Azrahan core energy is a technique developed by the Grandmaster known as Javier Azrahan and his noble subordinate, Lloyd. This technique is a symbol of the imperial family, which is passed down only to the direct descendants of the imperial line. As he resides in the Crown Prince's body, he must have been taught this technique from an early age. Now, he has unlocked the first level of this technique, which allows his mana circle to circulate around his heart, helping him increase and absorb mana. Now his mana is at 120%, while he needs 1000 HP to reach the next level. Therefore, he feels the mana circle around his heart, as well as the mana circulating through his body with every breath. He is quite excited to experience this amazing feeling. Suddenly, he feels a sharp pain in his heart, and it feels like it is going to burst from his chest. Seeing him clutching his heart, Garden becomes very concerned. On the other hand, he receives a warning that there is a chance that his heart will stop at any moment because the pressure from the mana circle is affecting it. When he realizes that his mana circle and the growth of his heart are out of balance, he guesses that the size of the mana circle may be the root of the problem, as it surrounds his heart. He remembers the condition of Rakiel, whose illness prevented him from training his mana circle from a young age. Consequently, the mana circle around his heart is constricting it, which could lead to drastic consequences. So he decides to take another measure, as he needs to increase the size of his mana circle. With that thought in mind, he goes to the realm of his heart and stands in front of the heart and the mana circle that is strangling it. He rushes toward his heart and takes the reins of the circle in his hands, while deciding to increase the speed of its rotation. The pain and pressure of doing this are too much for him to bear. But he remembers the failures of his last life. His clinic was shut down. He not only lost his patients but also started to lose his hair because of the stress from being in debt. Every kind of loan piles up in a way that he is on the verge of selling his beautiful house. With that thought in his mind, he finally does it. With this, he opens his eyes and looks at his doctor, who is quite concerned about him. His system informs him that he has been able to awaken his heart due to the positive stimulation. Afterwards, as a king of the organs, our guy's heart has a very flashy entry and is welcomed by the large intestine while the lungs call him shabby. Seeing them makes our boy feel annoyed, but his irritation vanishes when his system informs him that he is the only person in history to obtain something called the mana circle slot. He doesn't understand the feature but guesses that it must be something like the empty slot in a game. Meanwhile, Garden is still concerned about him and asks about his well-being, as he looked like someone who was suffering from immense pain. He raises the question of whether it is a side effect of the medicine. Our boy makes an excuse that he just choked on phlegm, but Garden doesn't buy it. He insists that our boy was in great pain while complaining that he is the one who is supposed to drink it first. At that, our boy retorts that he will be given poison next time if Garden is that eager to have one. It prompts a protest from his doctor, who doesn't mean it that way. He nonchalantly orders him to clean up the mess on the floor if his doctor doesn't want it. But before going ahead, he turns to his doctor and thanks him, which leaves the doctor totally shocked. He thinks that our hero might go crazy from consuming that poison. Meanwhile, On his way, our guy is more than excited to have something as amazing as mana slots. These slots are basically a place where he can store any material mixed with mana up to 10 liters. He needs to consume that material in order to store it. After meditating, he contemplates experimenting with this technique, but doesn't understand what to store at first. Then he sees the jug of water, and decides to experiment with it. Looking at the water, he recalled a term called as the median lethal dose, used to determine the toxicity of a substance. Consuming 50% of the median lethal dose could either kill a person or cause immense pain. He analyzes this and concludes that there is a chance of 5.4 liters of median lethal dose in the 60 kilos of water. According to his size and weight, it should be around 3.9 liters. So, he scoops up the jug to drink the water, but it's too heavy for him to lift due to his weak body. Anyhow, he drinks it while thinking he has a purpose in storing this in mana slots. He's surprised to feel that he doesn't feel full after drinking 1 liters of water, so he decides to fill his 10-liter slot to experiment further. After filling his slot with 10 liters of water, he discharges 0.1 liter and feels quite full afterward. He concludes that this makes him a human version of that camel that can store water inside itself. Now that he's experimented with the water, he wants to try this slot with tonic soup. However, he has 9.9 liters of water, and his body obviously won't withstand it if he releases all of that water at once. Then he gets an idea and decides to discharge the water with the Azrahan core technique, which helps him absorb, amplify, and discharge mana. Using amplification and discharge of this technique, he aims to release the water outside his body, rather than within. He concentrates solely on discharging the water from his body, and, much to his astonishment, it begins to work. The next step is to pour the water back into the jug, but when he tries, he can't hold the technique, and the jug breaks. As soon as the guards hear the sound of something breaking, they barge into his room. Meanwhile, he contemplates his experiment with the Azrahan core technique, as he has assumed it would release like tap water, but only for it to suddenly turn into a water cannon. Garden, along with the other guards, arrives and asks if there's been a terrorist attack. He nervously thinks up an excuse. Then he claims that he smashed the jug in anger. It seems the Gussards buy his excuse, and one guard even asks if he's hurt. He nervously answers that he just has a scratch on his foot. The guard turns to Garden and requests him to escort him to room 2, and he agrees to do so after tending to his wound. While having a piggyback ride on Garden's back, he thinks that no matter how bad his excuse was, they still accepted it. He concludes it must be because he's the crown prince. Garden places him on the bed and excuses himself. He tells Garden to get some rest as well in return. When Garden is gone, he starts contemplating what happened when he was practicing the Azrahan technique. He was amplifying the mana and discharging it through his hand, but it resulted in an outburst like a water cannon. For now, he decides to sleep and tread carefully next time because he doesn't want anyone to be suspicious of him. Meanwhile, the Emperor gets wind of how he's hurting himself with needles and eagerly drinking poison, which infuriates him as he doesn't understand what his son is up to. The next morning, he successfully brews 10 liters of his medicine, ready to consume it all. But Garden is standing beside him, and he doesn't want to take it in front of him, knowing he'll probably faint at the sight. So, he requests Garden to wait outside for a while. Garden deadpans that he's just going to drink it, pointing out how much it hurt last time he consumed it. He even reminds Garden of the excuse he made, claiming he choked on phlegm. Garden expresses his concern over the fact that he's made so much tonic this time. Our boy makes an excuse, saying that he's experimenting with something, although he only intends to take a small dose since it's impossible for him to drink it all. At that, Garden tries to laugh off that indeed he can't do it. But our hero is quite impatient with his unnecessary concern and throws him out of the kitchen. Afterwards, he closes the door and gulps down all 10 liters of tonic in one go, storing it in his mana slots. Now, all he needs is to discharge it. He slowly begins discharging the tonic while going about his daily life. His organs seem to be improving as he discharges the medicine into his body, which gives him some HP points. Now he has 500 HP. He is quite tense yet eager to increase his lifespan. For this purpose, he releases the medicine in himself quite frequently. Meanwhile, in the organ dimension, the heart asks to large intestine for menu for the day. He answers that they have ephedra aconite asarum. Not only this, they have the same menu for the whole day and even for the next day as well. At that, his system warns him that his organs are sick of having the ephedra aconite asarum again and again. He annoyingly replies that they'll have whatever he gives them. While having his meal, his system informs him that he has extended his lifespan by 50 days, so now he has 133 days left to live. He stands up in excitement, startling the maid. She begins apologizing furiously. He's confused, wondering why she's asking for forgiveness like that when she's only broken a cup. He gets his answer when she begs him not to whip her like last time. At this, he grows tense. as he realizes that this crown prince has been whipping the girl. He asks if he really did it, hoping she'll say no. She answers negatively, which brings him relief. But she adds that he didn't do it himself. He asks what she did to deserve such punishment. She replies that she dared to spill a drop of water on his sleeve. This makes him think that this crown prince must be a truly cruel person. He doesn't like the scenario as he sits down on his bed while he tells her to leave after cleaning everything, which brightens her face. When she leaves, he turns to Garden and asks about his behavior toward him and the other servants, as he doesn't remember much about himself. Garden tries to sugarcoat things, but he warns him that if he does, he'll eat all of the poison right in front of him. At that, Garden tells him about his cruel and rude behavior toward the servants. He is quite frustrated after listening to all of this. He even understands why the guards had bought his ridiculous excuse about breaking that bottle. At that, one more question arises, that why someone like Garden is so loyal to him. He asks Garden about it as he doesn't seem scared of him. At that, he softly answers that it's because he truly knows what kind of person he could be and trusts him in this regard. In a flashback, it's shown that when Raquiel was a child, he saw him protecting a small chick from the rain, while he himself was drenched. Remembering this, he adds that he trusts Raquiel to return to his kinder self as his health improves. Thinking about Raquiel thanking him, Garden feels as though it's already happening. He offers Garden a pastry, which he accepts with some reluctance. In this moment, he vows to never let Garden be accused of his death. For this purpose, he will have to survive. Just then, someone rushes in and opens the door with a bang. Calling for him, this servant hurriedly tells him that the Emperor has summoned him. The scene shifts to the main royal palace, where Raquiel is shown approaching the court of his father. As soon as he greets his father, the Emperor immediately notices his awakened Azrahan technique. He also senses the nervousness of our guy. Meanwhile, our boy is quite tired from bowing before him and waits for him to get over it so he can stand up. The Emperor asks about his life in his side palace and whether it's up to his satisfaction, to which he answers affirmatively. Meanwhile, he is quite irritated at the fact that he has to stay bowed while talking to him. The Emperor then asks him what he heard about him as he is piercing himself with the needle and consuming poison at home. He tries to deny it. The Emperor starts to babble about how he is losing his dignity as a crown prince, and that if he thinks he can't bear the burden of being the successor, he can pass it to his second brother. Our guy, who doesn't expect this, politely refuses the proposal. The Emperor is quite angry at his refusal. However, our guy, on the other hand, pauses for a moment, while realizing that the Emperor has every right to strip him of his status as the successor, yet he chooses not to do it. Now he understands that why the Emperor asks him instead, because he wants to show the world that his son has done this to acknowledge his younger brother. Therefore, he understands this devious political maneuver, but he doesn't plan to go down without a fight, no matter how weak he may be. The Emperor, on the other hand, is so furious that he stands from his throne and accuses him of bringing shame to their imperial family because he wants to keep the title of crown prince. Our guy scoffs at this because he doesn't care about the title. In reality, he has read the novel, and according to it, the second prince is not capable enough to handle the age of Chao that is coming soon. Consequently, he will cause the downfall of the imperial family and the empire. So he turns to the Emperor and expresses his thoughts that he doesn't care about his title, but the prosperity of his family. So he proposes to give him a chance to prove that he is better than the second prince. Then the scene shifts to the side palace in which Garden is eager to know the reason behind the Emperor's summoning to him. He explains everything to him while dropping the bomb that he is going to have a sword duel with the second prince, which makes Hugged Doctor pack his stuff so that he will leave after his master defeats him. Meanwhile, the Emperor thinks about Raquiel's words and curiosity about this new side of his son. That's why he accepts his proposal. The next day, everyone in the Empire gathers to witness the sword duel between the brothers. The girls aim for the second prince, Theodore. On the stage, our guy is found exercising for the duel when Theodore approaches him. He tells him that he doesn't need to do it. He worriedly says that he doesn't want him to risk his health because he wants to give legitimacy to the throne to his brother, because everyone knows the result of the duel. He adds that he doesn't want his brother to sacrifice himself for this purpose. At that, our guy is ready to start a fight and informs him haughtily that both father and son misunderstand his intentions, because he doesn't have any intention of losing. Before starting the duel, there are murmurs of people about how weird it is for the crown prince to challenge the second prince, because second prince has the upper hand because of Azrahan core in a single circle. They don't think that he stands any chance against the second prince. In a flashback, it is shown that our guy, who is exercising, has Garden standing beside him, who is thinking that this duel is just a joke. Our boy replies that no one expects him to win, so it is good for him as it puts less pressure on him. However, Garden says with uncertainty that he can win. Our guy notices his expression and knows he is lying. Then he tells him that he just needs to block 3 attacks from his brother in order to win the match. In the present time, Garden prays for the safety of his master. The match starts, and the Emperor describes the rules. If our guy is able to defeat or withstand the attacks of his brother for 5 minutes, he will be the winner. Otherwise, the second prince will win the match. Now both brothers stand in front of each other, but Theodore intends to get through this match as soon as possible. As soon as the match starts, everyone is stunned to see the crown prince throw his sword away. They wonder whether he is giving up already. Seeing him do this, Theodore first feels relieved that he doesn't have to fight against his sick brother. But then he remembers that this will bring disgrace to him and his family. So he contemplates whether he should encourage his better to fight a little. But when our guy places the shield in front of him, he understands that the crown prince's aim is to withstand his weaker attacks for 5 minutes instead of attacking him. He smirks at that, while thinking that he will end this fight quickly. With this thought in his mind, he gathers the mana in his body and rushes toward his brother. The Emperor analyzes his second son's attack and concludes that his first son won't be able to withstand it. The second prince even tries to attack from above so that his brother won't fall to the ground disgracefully. But to everyone's surprise, our dude dodges the attack. Someone comments that the second prince is kind enough to strike weakly so that his bring can easily dodge it. The second prince attacks him again with full force, which throws him away, but he is still able to stand. Our guy's condition is getting worse as his body weakens, but he is still determined to win the duel, as he has practiced dodging throughout his life as a cop. He now kind of hides behind the shield as the second prince rushes toward him while absorbing the mana better than our guy expected. However, our guy grins at this, as something might be going on in his mind. On the other side, the second prince is also fired up. He builds up his attack, and after leaping into the air, he crashes down right at our boy. But my guy easily absorbs the impact, because he had already trained his lower body for this moment. Not only did he instruct the blacksmith to customize his shield, but he has also stored the concoction in his mana slots for his little brother. His system asks how much he would like to share the discharge of that concoction in his body, and he replies, with 0.2 liter. With that, his brother's mana-filled body is filled with the concoction, and the second prince's face turns red due to extensive drinking, which causes him to hiccup. Theodore is so confused about what is happening to his body. Meanwhile, Raquel thinks back to what he has read in the novel that Theodore is someone who can't stand any kind of alcohol. So he has added many types of alcohol to his slot and released it into his brother's body. Theodore is trying to pull himself up to win against his brother, but he doesn't understand what has gotten inside him. He wants to handle the situation and aim for the recognition of his father, the cheers of the citizens, and the title of Crown Prince. According to him, this is the best course of action for everyone if he becomes the Crown Prince. For this purpose, he has to win. With this thought in mind, he rushes toward his brother, who is stunned to see that he withstood the bomb of cocktail. Then he discharges another 0.1 liter cocktail bomb in his brother. The scene shifts as the second prince finds himself in the realm of his brother's organs, where he is served the drink by Hart, who tells him that he was given the drink by that person. He turns to see that the person is his own brother, who raises his glass to him. Seeing this, Theodore is completely baffled, as he assumes he must be hallucinating. Seeing his brother this drunk and stunned, the crown prince decides to help him. He is going to discharge the liquid he has stored in his mana slots at his brother. With this mana, he attacks him with all his might and throws his brother to the floor. Everyone present there is completely stunned by this unexpected turns of event before them. Witnessing the fight between his sons, the Emperor immediately recognizes that Raquel has used the Azrahan core, which he had thought he had mistaken before. He can clearly sense that Azrahan core energy radiating from him, even with hundreds of people around. On the other hand, when Theodore opens his eyes, he finds his brother at his feet. His brother claims he has purified his impure mana. Theodore immediately recognizes it as the Azrahan core and questions how it's possible for his sickly brother to use it. The supposedly sick brother nonchalantly replies that he simply learned it a little late. Glancing at his fallen sword, Theodore mutters that he's lost, prompting his brother to remark that Theodore might still not believe it. Then he notices the blood on his brother's forehead. Our boy explains that he got the injury while shielding himself from his brother's attack. Hearing this, Theodore realizes his own attitude throughout the fight as how overconfident he had been, while assuming victory without acknowledging his brother's efforts. Then our boy gets up and asks about his brother's well-being. His brother misunderstands his words and expresses his feeling of being ashamed. However, Raquel clarifies that he was actually asking about his condition. At that, Theodore takes a bow before his brother, as the acknowledgement to his skill as the crown prince in front of everyone. In that moment, a screen appears in front of our hero, making him cheer that he's finally done it. Misunderstanding his gesture as a victory over his brother, Garden becomes emotional upon seeing him. Our guy's system congratulates him for treating someone other than himself. revealing that he's acquired a skill called Requested Medical Treatment Fees. This skill allows him to gain a small amount of life expectancy each time he heals others. However, he notices that this method only extends his lifespan by a single day at a time, which sours his mood slightly as it's quite slow process. Still, he's willing to take it, seeing it as a more effective way to increase his lifespan than relying only on acupoint techniques or tonics. His thoughts are interrupted by his father, who asks if he used the Asura core in the fight, which he admits that he did. He then asks how he acquired it. He answers honestly that he doesn't really know, because he can't tell his father he acquired it as a reward skill to heal his body. His father, however, seems to believe him and adds that he had engraved this first into his body when he was born, but due to his illness, he couldn't use it. The Emperor adds that our boy has managed to overcome the shortcomings of his body and use it anyway. Thinking his father is praising him, he thanks him. However, his father interjects that all of this ruined his initial plan, which makes him wonder about the meaning behind his father's words. The Emperor turns his back to him, while assuring his son that despite his Oramos, he acknowledges his position as the crown prince, as he promised. Then he pauses, then warns him that he'll be keeping an eye on him to see if he's truly capable of succeeding to the throne. All of this makes our guy angry, but the Emperor is also frustrated by his lack of response, and shouts at him to show him some response. Instead of answering directly, the crown prince begins advising his father that he should keep sword fighting since his muscles are getting stiff. He adds that he needs to eat more vegetables and quit his tobacco habit. The Emperor demands to know who his son is to advise him like this, but our boy sincerely replies that he's only saying it out of concern for his father. A while later, the Emperor is seen riding in his carriage, while scoffing as he thinks about the change in his son's behavior. It seems that he's also worried about his son using Asura core technique recklessly, which could endanger his health. He reflects on the high expectations he's had for him, even he is sick, but now, after today's events, he finds himself holding on to a glimmer of hope for his son's future. Meanwhile, on his way back home, our dude is thinking about his own father from long ago, who died of a heart attack, since he skipped studying to play when he received a call about this bad news. He regrets it now, but it's far too late. Thinking about the Emperor, who could still have a chance, he decides to protect his father as well, while using his skill which will also help to extend his own life. At that moment, Garden appears again, his face emotional, while requesting his master to ask him why he's crying. Feeling awkward, he asks him anyway. Garden expresses about his pride in his master for winning the fight, no matter how tough it was. He brushes off Garden's concern, while adding that he'll now rest as he has many things to do tomorrow. To sense his confusion, he explains that he has to meet someone the next day. Later, Garden is seen with a guy at one of the top 10 restaurants in the capital, called Sorrentino. The guy asks if he knows about this restaurant. He replies that he's a regular customer there. It turns out that the guy is none other than our crown prince, who has disguised himself. When the waiter comes to take his order, he gives a strange request, like asking for grape wine without grapes, and saying he'd like eat until sunrise. It seems like this is some kind of code, because as soon as he gives the order, the waiter instructs him to follow him. Both of them get up from their seats while Garden looks bewildered by what's happening. Our boy tells Garden to follow the waiter, saying he'll understand soon enough. After a while, the waiter leads them to a staircase. Garden is still confused about how the crown prince knows about this place. He himself knows of it only because he's read about it in a novel. Garden asks why they're there. He ambiguously replies that he's there to collect some treatment fees, leaving Garden puzzled by his words. Changing the topic, he asks Garden if he knows someone named Damien, to which Garden responds negatively. Instead of explaining further to his loyal doctor, he opens the door at the end of the stairs. There they find a battle arena where two fighters are battling each other as the crowd cheers them on. Garden asks again about this place. He happily replies that it's a secret location. Then, looking around, he spots a tough-looking guy in the ring. Garden asks if this is the Damien person he mentioned before, to which he responds negatively. Just then, the door on the far side opens, revealing the true protagonist of the novel he's been reading in his world. This person is Damien Kyan. Everyone is cheering for Damien as soon as he enters the Colosseum. The host tells his tough-looking guy to leave the place, then introduces Damien, who is going to fight the main match of the night. He is just 17 years old when he joins the life of the underworld and defeats everyone over the next 3 months, which earns him the title of the Sword Genius. Then they let Damien's opponent enter the arena, which is a roaring troll rushing toward him. Our boy, who had been watching the spectacle, is also afraid to see a real troll there. Garden protests as well, because he assumes that they are planning to feed a human to the troll. Meanwhile, on the lower floor, the berserk troll is quite furious and tries to attack him, but Damien gracefully dodges its every attack. Damien, who is looking intently at the monster, unsheathes his sword, and with one swift motion, he slays it in two. The spectators watching the show are in awe of what he has done. Meanwhile, our hero thinks that this guy is more notorious than he expected. Then he realizes it is expected of someone who is the main character of the novel, a sword genius known as the rival of the Grandmaster Swordsman in history. He then orders Garden to follow him and goes ahead. After a while, they are stopped by a bulky man who warns them not to proceed. But as soon as our crown prince keeps a brick of gold in his palm, the man lets them go inside. There sitting is someone, from whom our guy tries his best not to be scared. He confidently takes his bottle of painkillers in his hand and asks whether he is going to take these cheap painkillers. Damien then asks for the reason he is there, or whether he is there to sell medicine to him. He answers ambiguously that it is something like this. Damien, on the other hand, tries to shoo our guy away by saying that he has had enough of them. Our boy confidently says that these cheap medicines are not useful when it comes to treating the constant throbbing pain in the back of his head. Now he has his attention, and he starts to explain the type of pain he has, in which the symptoms usually start from the back of his head, and the area around his neck and head feels stiff and itchy. He asks whether his shoulders and neck feel numb. Our dude detects the suspicious look in his eyes for him, as knows these things about Damien. He explains again about his condition, while adding that he feels immense pain from the sides of his head and between his eyes. Not only this, he feels goosebumps on his body, and his eyes pop out. Our guy is also acting out all these things while describing all of his conditions. While Damien looks at him intently, our hero continues his melodrama, while trying to convince him that instead of getting to the root of his problem, he is relying on painkillers, which are not a standard form of medicine. Damien is annoyed by him and ponders killing him for a moment. In the end, he tells Damien to use his mouth to say something, which annoys him because Damien thinks that he is the one who is not letting him say anything. Anyway, Damien asks about the identity of our guy, who jokingly tells him the truth that he is the crown prince, which irritates Damien. To convince him, he lies that he is sent there by Kuzman, who is kind of a sponsor for Damien. He adds that Kuzman is worried about Damien, and nowadays they don't have a sufficient amount of ingredients because of the season. Damien doesn't understand a thing our boy is babbling and asks about the meaning behind his words. Our boy explains that he has found a new way to relieve his pain. Damien asks whether it involves new medicine. Our boy answers that this matter can't be treated with that medicine, so there is a need to eliminate the root of his pain. He asks him to strip off his shirt and lie down so that he can explain the process of treating him. Damien does what he is told. His back is full of scars. Our boy jokingly asks whether he is scared, but he answers negatively while irritated, adding that he is a warrior who has hurt people and vice versa, which shuts him up. He then scoops a junk of moxibustion and asks whether it is his first time seeing something like this. Our guy places moxibustion on his back. Then he fires the substance onto his back while Damien nonchalantly remarks that such a treatment doesn't scare a warrior like him. However, after a while he is trembling with the pain, which makes our boy joke about it. He seriously hopes that he can bear the pain. He thinks about this guy who has a curse mark on his back, which is the reason he doesn't leave the underworld. Whenever he goes to fight, he feels immense pain. To cope with this pain, he starts taking lots of painkillers. He borrows and has to have another fight in order to pay his debt. This is the life of the protagonist of this story. He curses Kuzman for inflicting this cruel cycle on Damien. He now tries to smear the mark on his back with this process. He happily thinks that if he is able to cure Damien, he will not only extend his lifespan, but will also have his support. He decides to treat the other gladiators afterward. After the treatment is over, he tells him to get up. He looks intently at the mark on his back, which he has successfully cauterized. He then asks about what he is feeling at this moment. With an expression of disbelief, Damien expresses that he feels quite refreshed, something he hasn't felt in a long time. Our boy explains that he needs more sessions of that treatment. During this time, he needs to avoid touching the blisters on his back, oily food, and overexerting himself. He is struck by the last demand. Our boy explains that he shouldn't fight, which meets with a protest as it is not something Kuzman will allow. At that, he consoles him by saying that he will take care of that matter. Now Damien understands that our guy is not what he has told him and asks about his identity with a baffled expression. Our boy proudly tells him that he is a crown prince, but Damien doesn't believe him and remarks that he must have a reason for avoiding revealing his identity. Our boy decides to let go of this matter and instructs Damien to do whatever he has told him to do. Besides, he strictly tells him not to go to the Colosseum no matter what is happening there, as it is a safer place for him. In the end, he adds that this is their only way to meet each other. Upon hearing this, Damien's face turns red, and he eagerly agrees with him. On their way back, there are hundreds of questions Garden has about this illegal place, but he asks him to help him to find something. When asked what it is, he tells Garden to look for a man with black hair, a ponytail, and slit eyes. After looking in some places, he finally finds him in a bar. He sits in front of him and gets straight to the point, saying that he needs to buy Damien, so he should tell him about his total debt as well as the cost of breaking the contract. At that, Kuzman demands 9 trillion magan, which could only be afforded by someone as wealthy as a crown prince. Our boy explains that he is the crown prince. That person starts to laugh at his expense and tells him that if Raquel is a crown prince, then he is also the one with the name of the crown prince that sells the medicine. Then he tells him to get lost if he doesn't want to buy medicine. When our boy leaves, he summons a man and asks him to investigate our dude to know about his identity. He even asks him to torture him however he wants in order to get that information. After 1 hour, the same person he sent to torture our crown prince is thrown in front of him, bleeding and injured. He is baffled to see him and asks who has done this to him. Then he sees the royal guards in front of him, who announce that the secret royal inspector is before them. Then our boy takes off his wig and shows him the royal badge. It is 1 hour ago that Garden and our boy are going somewhere, while being aware that they are being followed by Kuzman's man. He tells Garden to act normally so the follower doesn't suspect that they know he's there. He knows it is inevitable that Kuzman will send someone to follow him, which is why he approached him in the first place. The next moment, when the stalker turns, he collides with the royal inspector. The royal guards have accused this stalker of attempting to assassinate the crown prince. Now they stand before Kuzman. Our boy has returned the badge to the secret royal inspector, while Kuzman tries to grasp the situation. But before he can react, our boy orders his royal guards to raid the place, especially to capture Kuzman. With his order, everyone rushes to subjugate the place. Witnessing the scene in front of him, Garden thinks that the crown prince really has changed. Now he worries about his country's security, which is why he's raiding underground organizations. On the other hand, the crown prince seems more than happy to see the people around him. If they get injured, then he has a chance to heal them. He'll have an opportunity to extend his lifespan. Meanwhile, Kuzman hides in the corner while contemplating the situation. He wonders about the crown prince's interest in buying Damien while he's trying to escape. As he rushes toward the gate, he decides to stay hidden until things cool down. But as soon as he opens the door, he finds himself at the edge of several swords. Meanwhile, our guy makes a bet with his doctor that he will come out from this gate. And now he demands 500 magan from the poor doctor. He then comes forward and starts to babble about how important it is to pay for one medicine. When Kuzman yells at him, while asking what that crazy shit he is talking about, he clarifies that he comes with good intentions to clear out the medicine expenses of Damien and offers him a good deal. But he is the one who throws it away. Hearing this, he is infuriated and about to hit him, but his face meets the iron fist of the royal guard. Next moment, he is warned to stay down. Finding no escape route, he decides to use the capsule bomb that contains poison in his mouth and spits it out. After 5 seconds when he has planned to spit the capsule. In this way, everyone in the vicinity will be paralyzed, while exposed to the capsule, and he will escape and kill the crown prince. He is content with his perfect plan. He is about to split the capsule while counting down from 5 to 1. But before he can spit it out, Raquel shuts his mouth with his palm. Kuzman realizes that he knows his every move. At that moment, the time for the bomb to explode has reached, and it explodes in his mouth. The paralysis process begins, and he needs to take the antidote as soon as possible. With trembling hands, he tries to take it out from his pocket. But our hero, who reads the novel and knows everything about him, takes the antidote from his hand and asks whether he wants to know his source of knowledge. To the horror of this goon, our dude drinks the antidote in front of him while poking him, as he emphasizes that he isn't going to tell him about it. To taunt him more, he remarks about the antidote's bitter taste. While Kuzman is quite desperate to get the antidote, our boy carelessly throws it on his back. He implies that he is not going to give him the antidote when Raquel was the one to poison him in the first place. He intends to do it in order to use his medical treatment skills to extend his lifespan, as now he has the antidote in his mana slots. Now under the 5th thoracic vertebrae, he pushes about 1.5 inches on both sides, pushing the heart transporter points. With that, Kuzman throws out the poison. Then he discharges the antidote inside of him and waits for it to work. After a few seconds, he loses consciousness, as our dude has successfully treated him. To reward him, his life extends by 118 days. He then orders his guards to arrest them. Now he is going to complete his main goal for coming here. The scene shifts to the gladiators with Damien as their leader, who are fighting with the guards and succeeding in injuring many. At this moment, Raquel makes an appearance in front of him, and he recognizes him immediately. The scene changes to the dream in which a young Damien is shown in front of his dead mother. He knows that he is dreaming about that day when he was left alone. At this moment, someone tells him to wake up, and he opens his eyes, finding himself in front of Garden, who introduces himself, and Damien also tells him his name while shaking his hand. Our crown prince interrupts their introduction and asks both of them to follow him as they have many things to do. Afterwards, they arrive at a moxibustion clinic. They find other gladiators there as well. Damien asks about the place where they are. He answers that it is a treatment clinic. Another gladiator expresses his wonder about his reason for being so nice to them, as he doesn't only shelter them in his palace while rescuing them from underworld, but is also going to treat them. He thinks, while looking at them, that his main reason for treating these gladiators is to free them from their curse marks. While doing this, he can extend his lifespan, as most of them are young people, which helps him boost his own lifespan. He starts by saying that he is not going to do it out of goodwill because everyone knows that he himself is quite a sick person. One of them chimes in that everyone in the kingdom knows this, and our guy promises in his mind that this person will get the most painful treatment. Anyway, he continues saying that since the doctor failed to find a cure for him, he is now doing it himself. Then he turns to Damien and asks whether he gets what he is trying to explain. Damien answers that they are there to be his test subjects, which he confirms. Everyone is quite worried to hear it. But our guy counters by asking Damien what he felt after the last treatment. Damien answers that he felt relief from nerve pain. Upon hearing this, everyone feels relieved if Damien is providing the testimony in Crown Prince's favor. Then he asks everyone if they feel uneasy about getting treatment. When no one answers, he instructs them all to strip off their shirts and lie down on the beds. After 6 days, every gladiator is shown in the worst condition. They are constantly throwing up and breaking out in cold sweats due to not taking painkillers. Our boy is quite nervous to see the results of his treatment. He turns to Damien and asks if he is feeling dizzy or throwing up. Damien answers that he is, but he's holding up. Now he understands that Damien is an exception, because he is the protagonist of the novel for a reason. He then dismisses everyone to their accommodations but instructs Sergio to stay. He comments on his bad condition because of withdrawal symptoms, but Sergio tries to say that he's fine. Then he shows him the needle, saying that he is going to help him with it. Meanwhile, he is thinking that he's not sure whether the acupressure treatment will work on Sergio or not. But Sergio is the one who has been taking the painkiller for the longest time, so he needs to be the test subject for this. He considers targeting his running point near his stomach. While he's thinking about all this, Sergio rises from his place, looking quite powerful in his form. He then jumps on our guy and grabs his throat with both hands. Raquiel is having a harder time breathing, but Damien comes at the right time and knocks Sergio away from him. Raising his hand to help him up, he asks about his well-being, which Raquiel answers positively. He looks at the unconscious form of Sergio and concludes that, because of his severe withdrawal symptoms, he is highly sensitive to any minor stimulation. This is why a small needle will hurt him like a sword. To resolve this problem, he needs thinner needles. After a while, he is seen in his study, reading a letter from a blacksmith. To summarize the letter, the blacksmith apologizes to him for being unable to make multiple thin needles as fine as thread. The letter adds that only a dwarf artisan could achieve such a feat. At this moment, he gets a notification from his system, warning that he is stressing too much, which could lead to nervous illness. His organs are trying to cool down the heart while trying to give him a hint. Seeing him lost, his system reminds him that he can summon a monster or unlock a skill by using his HP points. He then selects the summon gacha option for the cost of 300 HP. While confirming the purchase, he hopes to get a good summon. His system instructs him to verbalize the qualities he wants his summon to have. He demands a creature that can provide him with many needles of uniform thickness. After recording his request, his system provides him with 3 options with bizarre names like a happy summon that oinks, iron that discharges, and a cactus that discharge. Then his system informs him that one of these summons has a 100% ability to meet his demand, one has 50%, and one has 0%. Upon reading this, he realizes that this summon is a kind of gamble, so he contemplates which summon to choose. After thinking for a while, when he can't decide, his heart frustratingly tells him to choose the cactus, and he agrees. While his system prepares his gift, he pleads to God for the right summon. Then, a very cute porcupine is dropped onto his palm. Now his system is informing him about the qualities of his new summon. He can alter its size by feeding it either red sunflower seeds, which will make it huge, or blue seeds, which will return it to its original tiny size. Its name is Goswem, and it has the skill of producing an infinite number of thorns and attacking its enemies with them. He politely asks his summon for 3 thorns, each of different colors, and it provides them to him. He checks the white and brown ones. The white one has a mild pain effect, so he decides to use it for the gladiators. However, he's a little cautious of the black one, as it has a higher pain level. He doesn't even test it and decides to try it on someone else later. Then he goes to his clinic, warming up the needle. Seeing him, Garden asks about his summon, and he introduces it to him. At that moment, he makes up a story and tells Garden to ask the remaining details from the summon itself, then leaves the place. Garden is quite baffled by this situation, as he recognizes this creature as a summon monster. According to legends, There was a legendary builder around 300 years ago who had summoned monsters as his aid. They are known as very rare and mysterious creatures, and Garden doesn't understand how his master got one. Now he realizes there is something about his master that he doesn't know. Inside the clinic, Sergio apologizes to our guy for the incident yesterday. He shakes off the apology, while telling him that he will now no longer feel the pain, as he has pierced many needles into his body. He is surprised to hear that, because Sergio doesn't seem to feel anything. He then shows him his arm, where he performed the acupressure treatment. Afterwards, he has been performing this treatment on everyone. To get the rewards from treating Damien and the other gladiators, his life expectancy increases by 171 days. Not only that, but he also levels up his skill due to using it on a larger number of people. This information makes him quite happy, as it is clear from his body language. Seeing him so happy, Damien doesn't understand his true motives, as he wonders why the Crown Prince is ecstatic to see them recovered. Now that Raquel is done with their treatment, he decides to come up with another plan for them. The scene shifts to the Emperor, who is getting a report about his son. He is informed that the Crown Prince has 14 gladiators as his bodyguards, who are now officially recognized as royal guards. He is giving them salaries and other benefits for their work. At that, the Emperor starts to laugh at his son's expense, who should be resting in bed, but instead, he is getting a private squad. However, the next piece of information tenses him, as he is told that the Crown Prince has a habit of inviting every servant and guard to his side and poking them with needles. The Crown Prince is seen playing doctor with the numbers of servants. He asks one of them whether the needles he is piercing into his body hurt, and he gets a negative answer, despite the guard's expressions saying otherwise. Then he announces for a next patient. A few days ago, Damien is seen in front of our Crown Prince, who asks about his feelings during the moxibustion treatment. Damien answers that it still hurts a little. At that, the Crown Prince gives him the good news that he no longer needs the treatment as he is fully cured, which leaves him confused. He then thanks the Crown Prince, but he meets with a protest from the Crown Prince. Raquel asks him to hear him out first. The Crown Prince has a proposal for him, as he wants Damien's sword skills on his side, because he doesn't want his skills to go to waste. Then, he offers him a position as his bodyguard, with a smart salary and other benefits, instead of relying on emotional things like loyalty and friendship. He knows that Damien will advance in his sword skills and soon reach the Sword Master Syndrome, where someone becomes extra sensitive and endures even more pain than he had experienced before with a curse seal. So, he wants Damien to stay close when that happens. So, he is offering him the job as an excuse to keep him by his side. He adds many other perks to the job contract, but when Damien doesn't respond, he offers a 4-day work week, which prompts a cheer from everyone behind Damien. Upon hearing his job perks, everyone offers to hire them as well, under the pretense that it is their way of repaying their debt by protecting him. He dryly comments that they want to do it because the salary and other benefits come with the job, and they sincerely agree that it is the case. He is glad at their honesty, as he thought that people who claim to be loyal often hold grudges. So, he ponders on this matter and decides to hire them, as the original royal guards were loyal to his father, so it will be better to have his own private squad. He then gives them the name of SRG, and they are quite happy about it. He turns from them and thinks with a sigh that his lifespan still doesn't last much longer, as he has only 18 days left, besides having a very weak body, which is unable to search for more patients. After a while, he is seen in his study room, where he tells Damien and Garden that he is going to set up a clinic in his palace. At that, Garden startles him by saying that his cause is noble, to start a clinic as he wants to help sick people. He totally agrees with him and tells him that he wants to treat the people living within the side palace because he doesn't think common citizens living outside the palace will feel comfortable visiting it. Garden also agrees with him. So, he explains that he needs this because, in this way, the word of mouth will serve as advertising for his clinic, so people will come to his side palace's traditional medicine clinic to receive treatment. Now, in the present, he is frustrated to know that everyone is quite healthy, and after treating 500 people so far, he has only received a 2-day bonus life. With his frustration, he exclaims that he needs a very sick person. Suddenly, he stops as the idea hits him. He orders Garden to collect data about the families of the servants he has in his palace. He is sure there must be some sick person among their families. He is quite frustrated to see that they all seem healthy, as only 10 pages remain. He doesn't have much hope, but he still keeps checking. He is interrupted by Damien, who expresses his disappointment with the Crown Prince. He is baffled to listen to him. Damien asks further whether he sees patients as the tool. Damien adds that he understands that he needs the patients for research, but now it looks like he is searching for someone on their deathbed. At that, Garden tries to defend his master as he must have some plan. However, the Crown Prince corrects his doctor, stating that Damien is right about his assumption. Damien protests, saying that he was rude towards Garden, while Garden tries to defend Crown Prince by saying that Damien is rude to him. Seeing this, the Crown Prince kicks both of them out of his room and checks the remaining 10 pages. One page catches his attention. Someone has written in this questionnaire about an 8-year-old boy whose body starts to tremble and foam at the mouth once or twice a week. The doctor as well as the cleric checked him, but it was of no use. Upon reading it, he is quite happy to finally have found what he was looking for. The next day, he gets to meet the young boy, who is a little scared to see him. He approaches him closely and greets him by telling him to call him Raquiel. He understands that this is George's first time visiting the palace and meeting the Crown Prince, so he needs to make him comfortable. He then shows him a candy, which brightens the boy's face, but instead of getting it, his expression turns sour. The boy tells him that he can't touch the Crown Prince. When asked why, he answers that it's because he is cursed. He adds that this is the reason he is bullied by other children and called weird. Upon listening this, Raquel tries to encourage the kid by saying that it isn't the case. The boy explains that when the kids were teasing him yesterday, he tried to defend himself but lost. Afterward, everything became dark, and he started to tremble, while feeling like someone threw him to the ground. When he woke up, he felt weak. At that, the Crown Prince suddenly hugs him, saying that he is brave for enduring all of this. With tears in his eyes, George supplies that he shouldn't touch him because of the evil spirit residing in him. In that moment, the Crown Prince begins to diagnose him. His system informs him that this person is completely healthy, besides some symptoms of seizures caused by irregular brainwaves. He diagnoses George with epilepsy, but the problem is that he doesn't know the cause behind the irregular brainwaves. He tells George that he is not strange. To sense his disbelief, Raquel happily tells him that he is the Crown Prince, and he is always right. Now, he is struck with what to do next, as he doesn't know the cause of the irregular brainwaves, and he doesn't have any tools to detect it, like an MRI machine. Suddenly, George calls out to him, and he tenses to see that George is having a seizure. He immediately lays him down, despite the protests of Garden, who wants him to stay away from the boy. Damien also raises his sword. To see their reactions, he shouts at them, while telling them that George is just sick and needs care, as he is in pain right now. He orders them to get him a pillow. Afterwards, he lays George on the pillow, and everyone looks at him. Garden offers to wipe the foam from his mouth. He answers that he is not in his right mind, as George might swallow the hand towel. They can't do anything right now until the seizure is over. Suddenly, he notices mana coming from George. He understands that it's because of his Azrahan core technique, which is sensitive to mana. He then decides to use this technique to detect the cause of the epilepsy. He then searches for the cause inside the flow of mana. He checks the nerves but can't find anything, though he is getting tired. Afterward, he is standing in front of George's heart and rushes to it. Finally, he catches the source of the irregular brain waves, which are happening in the vagus nerve. He then orders his subordinates to bring him a blanket to cover George up. He also instructs them not to wake him. In the process, he, who also overexerted himself during the diagnosis, and falls down. The people around him are worried to see his condition, but he feels relief in having found the cause of George's illness before losing conscious. After a few hours, he wakes up with a heavy head. He assumes that his Azrahan core was activated to its maximum when he was asleep. At this moment, he is startled by Damien's presence, who informs him that he has been sleeping for half a day. He asks about George and is told that George has woken up but is now feeling tired. While getting up from his bed, he thinks about how the diagnosis he performed was successful through his Azrahan core. Now he can start George's treatment by stimulating the vagus nerve. As he is putting on his coat, Damien asks with surprise where he is going in the middle of the night. He answers with a maniacal expression that he is going to be struck by lightning. After a while, he, along with Damien, is seen in front of the main palace. The guards are shocked to see him there. He asks the guards to escort them to Sir Xanatis's room. They head ahead to reach Sir Xanatis's room, who is the palace mage. He is astonished to see them there in the middle of the night and asks about their purpose to be there. The Crown Prince then playfully asks the mage to strike his back with lightning magic, which leaves the poor mage totally baffled. The mage remembers yesterday when he had visited the Emperor, who was telling him how the Crown Prince has been acting differently and strangely in recent days. He says, while smiling, that he is worried about what his son might do next. Seeing his expression, the mage thinks with annoyance that the Emperor has also become a fool when it comes to his son. In the present time, the boy is shaking the annoying mage furiously while asking him to hit him with lightning. The mage thinks about how crazy the Crown Prince has become. He protests to the prince that he can't do it, as it might kill him, which would make him accountable for his death. The Crown Prince explains that he doesn't need to go that far. He just needs a bit of electric stimulation for 3 hours. The mage is equally annoyed by this new demand. Lightning magic has destructive capabilities, but the prince wants him to minimize it and maintain control it for 3 hours, which requires precise control. He asks the prince if he has any idea that his request is quite difficult. The crown prince answers that he totally understands, which is why he came to him, because no one else could achieve such a feat besides him. Hearing this compliment, the mage is half ready to fulfill his demand, but he's still hesitant, wondering what if he hurts him. The crown prince consoles him by saying that he guarantees if something happens to him, mage won't be accountable for his death, while pointing to the guards who will witness it. He further explains that he is doing this to save someone. The mage then agrees to his demand and asks when they can start. The crown prince replies that they need to do it now. Then he sits in front of the mage, who asks if he's ready. He nods, while secretly thinking that he can't just experiment with such a dangerous treatment on a child, so it's better to experiment on himself. When the mage starts to hit him with a precise amount of electricity, the crown prince is going to convert the electric currents into electrodes. Then, he will transform them into electrical signals and intends to use them to correct the irregular signals in George's vagus nerve. In the end, he will control those signals. While analyzing his plan, he is in awe of Azrahan core technique, which makes it possible for him to be successful in one try. He asks the mage to stop, who teasingly tells him that he could do it all day. The next day, many people who are known as gossip mongers are seen in front of his room. One of them opens the door, and now everyone is standing in front of George and his doctor, the crown prince. Rakiel shows George a needle and honestly tells him that it's going to hurt a little, as it is a medical procedure. He then reassures him that it won't hurt much, since he already pierced one needle into his neck, and George didn't even realize it. He adds that what is coming, however, will definitely hurt. Then, the mage hits Rakiel with electric magic, and he gathers the electricity in his heart. Garden feels like he's about to faint from seeing his master's condition. But our dude's focus remains on the gossip mongers in the room, as he is hoping that they will spread the word about his method of treatment everywhere. After receiving the electric current, it's now time to transfer it into George. However, he tenses up when he detects that George's flow of mana is becoming erratic. With dread, he realizes that George is about to have a seizure, so he must correct his nerve before it happens. George asks how much longer he has to stay like this. He answers that he has only 3 minutes, or if things go south, just 1 minute. But overall, the procedure will take 30 minutes. For a moment, he thinks about pausing the treatment, but he decides against it for several reasons. Because the gossip mongers present there, who could fuel strange rumors, and the uncertainty of how much longer the mage will continue to help him. He finally resolves to proceed and turns to the mage, asking him to increase the power level of the magic 3 times. The mage warns him that it will hurt more, but he brushes off his concern. However, this time, he is struck by lightning, yet he focuses on his task at hand. He needs to absorb the mana in order to complete the procedure as quickly as possible. He searches for the carotid to place the electrode, while knowing that only 5 seconds remain before the seizure will start. Finally, when it seems like George is about to have a seizure, he instead turns normal and looks at the crown prince. Everyone, especially George's sister, is amazed to see that the seizure doesn't happen. Meanwhile, the crown prince is quietly tired from the constant electric stimulation. However, his system congratulates him for successfully performing the vagus nerve operation. He receives a 3-day life bonus as a reward. Not only that, his Azrahan core technique levels up by surpassing his body's limit, now reaching level 2 in a single circle, which also increases his mana circle. He further gets a notification that his lungs and large intestine have absorbed metal energy and gained immunity over wood magic. To use this wood energy, his new organ, the liver, awakens. At that moment, a very angry and arrogant liver enters the organ realm, making the large intestine happy that he's no longer a newbie. But instead of being happy, the liver delivers a slap to the large intestine and deadpans that he can't make him a newbie if he doesn't have a death wish. Next moment, he grants our boy 300 HP. Our boy's other organs also grants 500 HP after welcoming their new counterpart. Not only this, it seems like his organs are quite happy as he has additionally received 300 HP because the organs are having a birthday party for the liver. He is quite pleased to get all of these achievements and extra HP in one day. He wonders if there's something more, but his system answers negatively. At this moment, George addresses him, while asking whether he's a weirdo. That little kid explains that normally when he feels strange, he will lose control, but it doesn't happen this time. At that, Rakiel explains that it won't happen from now on as he will not suffer from any kind of fit. He even promises that claim over his crown prince title. Listening to all of this, George's sister standing in the crowd becomes quite emotional. George turns to her and hugs her lovingly. Rakiel tells everyone that it was a successful operation, which makes them emotional too. He hopes that these people will spread the news of George's treatment everywhere, so soon he will face a swarm of patients, which will result in bonus life. Suddenly, his vision blurs and he loses consciousness because of the stress his body has gone through. At night, he regains consciousness and sees Garden, Palace Mage, and Damien standing in front of him. He jokingly asks whether they don't have any work to do besides watching him sleep. Garden states with a sad expression that this is the case with him because Raquiel has been sleeping for 2 days, which leaves him baffled. The mage also interrupts, while accusing him of intending to execute him. He further asks, with a horrified expression, that how he's going to explain to the Emperor about the Crown Prince's condition, which happened because of the lightning magic he used on him. Our dude nervously apologizes to all of them. Then, he asks about George, and at that moment, George appears in his room. He explains that he nags Garden to allow him here. Then he gives him a handmade wooden locket. Seeing his effort, our guy feels a little ashamed because he didn't help George out of goodwill, but to extend his own life. He tries to say something, but George interrupts, claiming that he wants to help others just like Raquiel. This statement leaves him totally stunned. He then compliments his necklace and states that seeing George healthy is the greatest reward for him. Then he dismisses everyone, saying that he wants to rest a little more. So everyone leaves the room while George bids him goodbye. When everyone leaves, he looks at the necklace with annoyance, while wondering who would want to wear something so plain. However, as he sleeps, as if mocking his own statement, he finds himself wearing it. The scene shifts to the house of a commoner. A mother asks her son about his reason for being there as he should be at work. The boy enters, while greeting his parents, and tells them that he is on special leave from the Crown Prince. It seems like he is part of a group of gossip mongers, and the Crown Prince has given him leave to spread news about his strange method of treatment. Afterwards, the boy informs his parents about how he and others are given a special 5-day leave. He also mentions that the Crown Prince doing strange things, like wanting to treat people. Then, he shows them the paper. It is a kind of pamphlet in which the Crown Prince announces the opening of his medicine clinic in his side palace and offers all kinds of treatment for free. Meanwhile, in his palace, our boy is excited to see the result of the rumor. Garden interrupts him, saying that it's time to go. On their way, Garden comments that he wakes up early today. He replies that it's because it's his first day at the clinic. Garden informs him that he has stocked all the medicine, including licorice, which is difficult to procure. At that, our guy praises him, while adding that he needs licorice for many things, so he instructs him to stock as much as possible. Garden nods while expressing his wonder about where the Crown Prince learned things like making potions and acupressure treatment. He adds that he wants to know because he is also a doctor. In the end, he expresses that he has sacrificed many sleepless nights researching the basis of the methods the Crown Prince is using. But he hasn't found any clues, which upsets him. As a doctor, Raquiel also understands Garden's frustration over not knowing these new things. He then reveals that he is from another world, where he ran a traditional medicine clinic, which is why he knows everything. But Garden doesn't believe him and insists him to tell the truth. Raquiel insists he's telling the truth and asks why Garden is so persistent in knowing the truth. Garden answers with determination that he wants the satisfaction of becoming a better doctor, like Raquiel. In response, our boy tells him that he is already doing it and orders him to go ahead. As Garden walks away, Raquiel reflects that Garden is the reason he has come this far. Then his thoughts shift to his medical clinic, and he prays there will be lots of patients. He worries that the stress will cause him PTSD. He opens the door, ready to welcome the patients with a cheer. At first he pales seeing no patient in the hall, but then Garden points out for him to look below, and he is shocked to see tons of people standing outside, trying to make their way in. After a while, he's diagnosing a patient when his servant asks about his work. He instructs him to check on the other patients to see if they need help. Next, he turns to the maid, who isn't preparing the medicine correctly. He knows the nursing system is not up to par and that it will take time to settle down. After seeing several patients, he gains enough experience to level up his pulse reading skill. Now he can not only assess the overall health of a patient, but also detect symptoms related to the internal organs. In this way, his internal organs are going to help him detect any problems with the organs of the patient by consulting the patient's organs. The scene shifts to his organ realm, where everyone is ready to have a blind date with patient's organs. The heart claims that he is not interested in anyone younger or older than 4 years old. However, the liver points out that they are going to meet all the older people. Seeing them, everyone is disappointed by the idea of consulting. Despite their reservations, they give the results. They didn't find any abnormalities, aside from slight constipation. But the liver informs them that this person shows symptoms of hepatitis, so he needs to give up alcohol. The liver further explains that the old man's liver is likely to survive only for another 5 years. He is amazed to hear this diagnosis, as it forms the foundation of every treatment. Determined, he now decides to awaken the other organs as well. Turning to his patient, he informs him about his liver's condition and prescribes medicine for 10 days. At the end, he deadpans that the man should stop drinking, as he's likely to die in 5 years if he doesn't. Then, he orders the patient to quit alcohol as the crown prince, or he'll be thrown into jail. The man is completely petrified upon hearing this. Afterwards, he dismisses all the non-critical patients, sending them home. Then, the servants turn to him, while showering him with praise and apologizing for the mistakes they've made. He nervously encourages them, while acknowledging their hard work. Meanwhile, he is thinking about establishing a proper nursing system, as it will be necessary if they admit more patients. He wishes his nurses from the modern world were here to help. At this moment, Garden bursts through the door urgently and tells him that there is a patient who needs immediate care. The son of the family pleads with him to save his mother. After laying her down on the bed, he asks the son about her condition. The son replies that she's had a fever since the afternoon, and her condition has worsened since then. After checking her veins, he is horrified, as he realizes that she might be suffering from the illness that killed 40,000 soldiers of Napoleon's army. With dread, he recognizes her condition as epidemic typhus fever, which is an acute febrile illness caused by Rickettsia bacteria infection. He hesitates for a moment to accept it, but the liver informs him that it has indeed seen Rickettsia bacteria in her blood. He gulps upon hearing this and asks the patient's son about the last time she took a bath. The son replies that she took a bath yesterday. He then asks about her bedding condition. The son answers that she is a tidy and clean person. After finding no clues there, he asks whether she had been anywhere where she might have encountered lice or fleas. The son then answers that she had slept on a farmer couple's bed when her carriage broke down on her way back home 15 days ago. To analyze her situation, he concludes that she must have epidemic typhus fever. He then informs her son about her condition, while explaining that she is infected by lice. Seeing her age and temperature, he concludes that she might have pneumonia, or could suffer from central nervous system damage, or might develop necrotic body parts. He then instructs the maids to clean the patient with warm water and change her into patient clothes. He orders them to burn her clothes and bedding, take a bath themselves, and burn their own clothes as well afterwards. He even threatens to fire and punish anyone who disobeys his orders. He then orders her son to inform about her condition to their family. Later, he stands in the kitchen, where he has made a kudzu root tonic soup, which is a type of fever painkiller, for his patient. He then gives her the first dose of the soup. 3 days pass, and they care for her continuously, but unfortunately, her condition does not improve due to the persistent high fever. He now understands that the soup dose is not enough for her condition. She needs a balance of yin and yang, as her yin energy has been drained. He realizes that he must find medicine with strong yin energy to restore her balance. He thinks for a while about where he can find such a medicine. Realizing that it may be in his father's secret treasure vault, he orders Garden to prepare a carriage for him. He isn't sure he will find it there or not, but he intends to use his privilege as crown prince, as he hopes his father might help him. After a while, he's seen greeting his father, who asks why he has come at this late hour. He requests permission to enter the secret palace vault. Sensing his father's confusion, he reveals the condition of his current patient, who is severely ill. His father questions how this is related to his request to visit the vault. He explains that he is searching for a medicine to cure her, and might find something there. In response, his father expresses disbelief, because he suspects that he's making an excuse to access the vault for his own gain. Meanwhile, his father seems amused by his son's predicament, a fact our crown prince notices, and finds it quite annoying, given his father's antics. He tries to reason with his father, while insisting that he doesn't have time to prolong this matter. However, his father remains unconvinced by his outburst, believing that since he didn't receive a proper education, he shouldn't suddenly be treating people. His father asks him to prove that his diagnosis is correct. At this, our boy asks whether he wants to test him, which the emperor affirms. He then orders our boy to diagnose the condition of Royal Knight Captain Roberto, who is recently ill. If his diagnosis will be correct, he will grant him access to the vault. He checks the captain's pulse while his father, who is quite arrogant, assumes that he won't be able to determine his condition, as only he, the captain, and the captain's wife know about it. After a few seconds, our boy announces that the captain has partial baldness, which shocks both the captain and the emperor. The emperor points out the captain's full and shiny hair. This prompts our hero to remove the captain's wig in response. This leaves the captain in a state as if he is about to break down. Then our hero turns to Damien and orders him to proceed. On their way to the vault, Damien remarks on his harsh move to remove the captain's wig. He carelessly replies that he'll treat him next time. During their discussion, they finally reach the vault. The guards hand him the secret pass to enter the vault. He asks what happens to someone who doesn't have this. The guard explains that it activates the attack magic within the vault and will also track his time inside. If he exceeds the allowed time, he will be killed. Finally, he tells him he is allowed inside the vault only until daylight. Shocked to hear this, He realizes that they have only a few hours, so he rushes toward the vault, only to stop as the guard who informs him that he's headed toward the intermediate area. Annoyed that his plan didn't work at all, he remembers that his father has only granted him access to the basic area, where he can take only one item. Frustrated, he complains that his father tricked him, while not mentioning the level restrictions when he tested him. He is still annoyed with his tricky father and resolves to avoid taking his help in the future. Once inside the vault, they are surprised by its vast size. He sets an alarm for the entire night and turns to Damien for help. Damien asks how they can locate what they need. He replies that they're looking for anything with ice properties. Once Damien finds anything related, he should write down the location so he can check it out later. They then split up to search both sides. However, our guy is unable to find anything useful and hopes that Damien will find something. When his bodyguard stands in front of him, he asks about the list. Then Damien hands him the list, which he realizes he can't read. So, Damien leads him to the location of the shield which he found. This is the only thing in the vault with ice properties. He looks at the description of the shield, which is a basic item. When infused with mana, it can manifest an ice shield. It looks more like a buzzer to order coffee, but his eyes stay glued to the description, which details how it manifests an ice shield when infused with mana. With that, he begins to infuse his mana into it to test it. It starts buzzing with his mana, and he's careful not to infuse too much, knowing that it has a limit for manifesting mana to deploy the shield. Then he infuses his mana into it again, this time more carefully, like he perfectly set the shower temperature in his previous life. He starts to feel a chill, and finally, an ice shield forms in front of him. He happily turns to his bodyguard and tells him that he'll need his help later. Now they need to go to his bonus HP, in other words, his patient. The next moment, the guards see him coming out of the vault with his bodyguard, and notice the sword at Damien's belt. One guard asks if they chose that sword, but they're interrupted by the crown prince, draped in numerous jewels and a velvet cape worthy of an emperor. When the guard looks at him, he annoyingly informs our dude that he's supposed to be free of all these embellishments. Later, inside the side palace, Garden wakes up from his sleep due to some noise and sees that Damien and the crown prince have returned. Seeing them together, he feels pleased, while believing that Damien is capable enough to protect Raquiel and that Raquiel has also found a friend in him. With this thought, he makes some tea and brings it downstairs for them. However, he spills the tea as soon as he sees Raquiel activating his shield while Damien attacks him with his sword. He exclaims that it's an act of treason. Let's go back a few minutes, when the crown prince told Damien he needed his help with something. Damien, who was truly impressed by the crown prince's passion to treat people, was ready to obey any of his orders. But as soon as the crown prince asked him to hit Raquiel with his sword until the ice shield breaks, his expression shifts to annoyance. It was the same argument Garden had seen from his room but didn't fully listen to. Damien protests, while asking if the crown prince really wants to label him a traitor. But the crown prince explains that he needs him to strike him with the sword so that the shield will break, and he can use the residue left from the strike in the medicine for his patient. At that, Damien suggests putting the shield on the ground so that he can strike it more easily. The crown prince explains that it's impossible because he needs to constantly infuse mana to maintain the shield. Damien then concludes that the crown prince needs him to break the shield without harming him. Being a smart person, Damien demands a bonus for each strike he lands, while explaining that what the crown prince is asking him to do will mark him as a traitor, and he can't do it without compensation. Raquiel snobbishly asks whether Damien wants payment for hitting him. Damien politely responds that he truly respects the crown prince for all he's doing for everyone. But this is a different matter, and he wants to be paid. Our dude really understands his demand, as he knows that Damien has faced many financial crises that led to his misery, so it's understandable for him to ask for something in return. Raquiel then hugs Damien while happily saying that he's just as he read about him, which makes Damien's expression sour. With that, he opens the shield and tells him that Damien will be granted a day's salary with each strike. Damien expresses his hope that he will get paid on time while striking him with his sword. On the other hand, to witness that scene in front of him, our poor Garden has lost consciousness. After the first strike, Damien tells him that he is going to increase the strength of his attack, as his current power might not be enough to break the shield. Damien stops his strike to see the crown prince, who looks like he's in great pain. Damien reminds him that he hasn't attacked yet, but the shield isn't broken by his strike. Damien asks whether he needs to increase his strength. However, our boy accuses him that he is increasing his bonus amount by striking with a weak strike. It fires up his bodyguard, and this time, he finally breaks the shield. As soon as he sees that, our hero starts dancing like crazy at the prospect of more bonus life. When he turns to enter the palace, he finds the faint form of Garden, and wonders why he is sleeping there. After a while, he is seen making a typical kudzu root tonic soup, in which he has also added fragments of the ice shield. Then he decides to store some in his mana slots. His system informs him that he has gained a new skill called Tonic Concoction. With this skill, not only will the tonic he makes be 10% more effective, but he can also analyze its effectiveness, toxicity, and other side effects. When he places the tonic, his system asks if he wants to utilize his skill to analyze it, which he agrees to do. The system then reads the description, while informing him that the tonic can restore water energy and reduce fever, with other cautionary instructions on its use. He is quite happy to read this, as it means he no longer needs to experiment the medicine on himself. Upon analyzing that it can recover water energy, he is sure it will aid in the recovery of Madame Dinrior. With this determination, he brings the soup to her room. He asks about her well-being from her son, who answers disappointedly that she hasn't recovered a bit. Seeing her energy further depleted, he hopes this soup will work. He coaxed her into taking the tonic, though she complained that it was a bit bitter. He explained that bitterness often comes with effective medicine. He then took care of her for the next 10 days. Everyone was astonished to see him feeding the patient and taking care of her by himself. That earned him much respect from his subordinates. Meanwhile, he fought through his own fatigue, wanting to survive just a little longer to earn that bonus life since he was almost there. With that, his system congratulated him, informing him that he had finally cured his patient's epidemic typhus fever. Thanks to his great effort and the respect he earned from his subordinates, his medical treatment skills leveled up, now increasing his effectiveness by 1.5 times. Along with his patient's recovery, he also gained a life expectancy of 146 days and 8 days of bonus life. Upon realizing that he could earn rewards this way, our boy impishly considers creating a false image of himself, one that would earn him praise and respect from those around him. This, in turn, would bring him even more bonus life. The scene shifts to the carriage moving through the woods, with our hero riding inside. He is thinking about getting professional nurses, as he's managed things so far, but he can't keep going much longer without their help. After a while, Madame Dinrior and her son get down from the carriage. Madame thanks him for the ride, as he has also cured her. She expresses uncertainty about how to repay him. He smiles, while thinking about the bonus life he's gained, and answers politely that seeing her healthy is more than enough reward for him. This statement makes her quite emotional, moved by his kindness. They say their goodbyes and are about to leave. It seems, though, that our guy has another plan, as he stops her son and invites him into the carriage, saying he needs to talk to him. The son of Madame Dinrior is a little uncertain about whether they can talk like this, as he is sitting with his backs to the crown prince, but the prince shakes it off. The son waited for him to describe his purpose, but Raquiel didn't say anything for a while. Suddenly, our dude starts to complain about how sore his body is and how much sleep he has sacrificed while taking care of his mother. Hearing all this, Dinrior wants to compensate him for treating his mother. Our sly hero, however, tells him that he can't accept anything from a patient, as it would ruin his reputation. But the son insists, while saying that he truly wants to do something in return. Hearing this, our hero is more than happy to accept his help, as the son technically isn't his patient, so he can take help from him. He then asks him to assist with something, revealing that Dinrior is an artist. A few days later, in Frontera Plaza, a landlord tells a boy that he should get employed by the crown prince, who is looking for staff. However, the boy isn't convinced at all and taunts the landlord, while pointing out that he's not late on rent despite his jobless status. The landlord quickly counters, by saying that he's actually 2 months late for the rent. The boy rushes off to get money for the landlord upon hearing that. Meanwhile, a mysterious girl in a hood listens to the exchange, contemplating something. The scene shifts to the inside of an art gallery, where many people have gathered around one particular painting. Our boy, along with Dinrior, is also there. Raquiel congratulates him on becoming a professional artist. However, Dinrior doesn't seem happy. When you see the paintings he has created, it's clear why this poor artist isn't thrilled to display his art. Several of the pictures depict the crown prince, with the first one of him showing a crazy pose alongside a captain, with the words, "I want you." Other paintings show some cool poses, including one of him with his companions. One of his very detailed paintings depicts him like a crying girl, which Damien wants to cut off. Dinrior is a little uncertain about whether his paintings will help him in his search for a nurse. The crown prince, however, reassures him, saying that his work will definitely make an impact. He shows Dinrior his own painting, in which Raquiel is portrayed surrounded by many strong-looking nurses, with a captain in the corner, labeled with the words, "Show me Ganho." The painting also includes a description encouraging people to become nurses, with the promise of a generous salary offered by the crown prince. Seeing this, many people agree to sign up and want to become nurses. The scene shifts to a stall where Garden is registering people for the nurse selection test. People are eager to apply, having heard that the salary is so good they could pay 2 years' rent with just 1 month's salary. Meanwhile, the same mysterious girl is lining up in front of the stall, eyeing the requirements for applying. But when she reads that applicants must be residents of the Empire, her posture shows her determination. Meanwhile, our boy is thrilled to see so many people applying for the nursing position. When Damien asks him why he's so happy, he answers that he's excited because the more nurses he gets, the more patients he'll have to cure, which will, in turn, increase his life expectancy. On the other hand, Damien is purely impressed by our boy's kindness, especially considering he offers such a good salary as well. After 6 days, an event called Show Me Genho is held, where the Crown Prince will test the people to see if they are fit to become nurses. The mysterious girl also makes her appearance, who is quite happy to have arrived on time. The host announces that they have gathered everyone to reveal the first task for the nurse selection test. However, he then reveals that this task will actually be announced next week. After a week, the host announces the first task for the nurse selection test and urges them to rush forward to the interview area. For this purpose, they get divided into 5 groups out of the 50 people who will race toward the main building of the side palace. But the twist is that only 10 candidates from each group who reach the side palace first will get selected for the next task. The remaining will be disqualified, which shocks everyone, and they rush toward their destination in order to reach earlier. As soon as 10 candidates enter the destined area, the guard disqualifies the remaining ones. Then, they immediately start the next task, which tests their ability to find an ingredient that is stored improperly among numbers of ingredients presented to them. While doing this, one of the candidates falls down. Everyone looks at them and ponders for a while whether they should help him or not, but none of them move from their table to assist the candidate. Our boy watches everything with a serious expression. Garden then announces the end of the test and informs everyone that they will be notified about the result after some days. They all are left, while worrying about their test results, but no one came back to help the ill candidate. It seems like this is a stage set by our hero, who wants to test the candidate's spirit of helping others. As soon as the candidates leave, he hurries to the ill person, who is none other than Damien, who is concerned about whether he has acted well or not. Our boy informs him that he has overdone it and needs to perform more naturally. He says this while putting on a dramatic scene of falling ill in front of Damien. Then he asks about the candidate's progress, to which Damien replies that they have all failed. Our hero adds that character is more important for a nurse than skills, which can be learned later. Next, they move to the next group, who also fails. Not only that, but all of the groups fail, which leaves our boy flabbergasted, seeing that no one cares enough about their fallen candidate. So, he decides to take a walk to clear his head. Meanwhile, he's also thinking that there are no candidates left, and he urgently needs to find a nurse. When he reaches the gate, he finds his guard arguing with a girl, who is saying to the girl that she is not allowed to participate because she isn't human. The girl retorts while emphasizing that she is a human. Witnessing this scene before him frustrates him. Not only do they already lack enough candidates, but now the guard refuses to let her in. At this, Damien deadpans that the girl is a werewolf. He points out that she doesn't have a tail, but Damien responds that she might be hiding it under her loose clothes. Damien suspects Raquel might be uneasy about the idea of a werewolf as a nurse. However, our greedy hero, who is eager to find a nurse, sees a werewolf as the perfect candidate for a nurse due to her abilities. Meanwhile, the girl tries to defend herself as a citizen of the nation, but the guard insists she's just a beast. Their argument is interrupted by the Crown Prince, who scolds his guards and tells them to stop. The girl, as a citizen of the capital, has every right to apply for the job. He then orders the guard to apologize to her, leaving her completely baffled. He also apologizes to the girl on behalf of his guard, and she introduces herself as Agnes. He tells her that she will be tested now, which startles her. Noticing her baffled expression, he explains that, as a werewolf, she has great stamina, but he wants to see it with his own eyes. Then he places her in a race competition with his guard. For this purpose, they will race to the fountain and come back, with the winner being the one who returns first. Agnes is fired up to hear this. She turns to the guard, ready to face off. Both Agnes and the guard are prepared to beat each other in the race. Both of them rush towards the destination as Agnes takes the lead. Within a few minutes, she touches the pole of the fountain and rushes back. As she gets past the guard, she analyzes his slow speed and concludes that she will be the winner. The guard, who is already nervous, sprains his ankle and falls down. She notices his fall and wonders whether he has dislocated his shoulder. But she tries to keep going as she wants to be the winner. However, she can't and turns back to the guard, relocating his shoulder, which prompts a shriek from him. While she is doing this, our boy congratulates her because she is hired. Then he gives her the necklace made by George. Afterwards, they sit inside, and the Crown Prince shows her the hiring contract. When she remarks that it looks complicated, he tries to coax her into reading it at her own pace. He is very interested in hiring her not only because of her physique but also because of personality, as she is perfect for the job. Besides, he has seen her fixing the guard's shoulder like she wants to make it as painful as possible, which will make the patient unhappy in the future. However, he still wants more people with the same qualities. After reading the contract, she informs him with a serious expression that she wants to add a clause from her side. She begins to say that she is the leader of her tribe, which makes our greedy hero salivate at the prospect of having 50 more people like her at his disposal. When she demands that they take a nursing test as well, he happily agrees. Then she approaches her other problem, one that she and her kind have been facing for years. He asks whether it's an issue of rationing. She answers negatively. She explains that they are having trouble because of their tails, which move on their own. Our dude is curious about whether this is a bad thing. She sadly explains that their tails depict their emotions, which can lead people to understand their feelings and use that to manipulate them. He is convinced that this is the reason she is wearing such baggy clothes. He suggests that she tie her tail to her legs. She responds that it refuses to cooperate in that way, almost as if it has its own mind. She explains that the tail behaves like an organ that follows its own rules. He then asks whether they can't be cut them off. She answers that it would make walking difficult, and, besides, it would regrow within a month. At first, he tries to let go of the matter, but soon he realizes with dread that she wants him to resolve this issue if he wants to hire her and her tribesmen. After that realization, he feels like pulling his hair out in frustration, as he has no idea how to solve this problem. He offers Agnes to be their society's guardian. When she asks for an explanation, he explains that he can provide them with security by using his position. But she rejects this idea, as it might worsen their condition if something happens to him or if he backs out from his promise. In this way, it's just a temporary solution. He asks if she wants something to solve the basic problem with their tails. She affirms, while asking whether he is going to help them. He answers frankly that he doesn't have much choice, but he doesn't have any idea yet, so he will start searching for one. Upon hearing this, she assumes that he must be an honest person since he doesn't make any false guarantees. Then she tries to excuse herself, but he offers her to stay at his palace. As soon as she leaves, he again yells in frustration, not wanting to lose talent like that of werewolves. Later, he is found in the library, looking exhausted but still hasn't found anything. He's interrupted by a loud yell from Garden, which scares the life out of him. He complains to Garden, who always startles him like this. When asked, Garden tells him not to stress further because he could get sick from it. He retorts that he's getting sick because Garden always startles him, nearly giving him a heart attack. At that, he first refuses our guy's claim, but then changes his tactic, as he is telling him that he'll soon get wrinkles if he keeps frowning. Our boy smiles softly at his doctor's antics because he knows he's doing this to help him feel better. He nonchalantly remarks that if he gets wrinkles, he'll just get Botox treatment. To Garden's confusion, he starts to explain what Botox is, but then stops with the realization that Botox could be his solution. Botulinum toxin is a highly potent poison used to paralyze. To test this, he decides to use a local poison to paralyze the tails of the werewolf, and for this purpose, he's going to use Kuzman poison. He then orders Garden to bring Kuzman poison to Agnes's room as he's heading there. Once they're inside her room, he informs her that he has somehow found a solution to her problem. However, before proceeding, he needs to analyze her body in both human and werewolf forms. First, he needs to find the exact spot where he should apply the poison to paralyze the tail. For this purpose, he analyzes Agnes's acupressure points and mana flow, which are slightly different from those of humans. The location of her governor vessels differs, and the acupressure points on her hips are farther apart, which is likely due to her tail. Between both of those acupressure points, he finds a blood vessel that connects to her tail. He then asks her to transform into wolf form because he wants to examine the tail's acupoint in her beast form as well. With that, she transforms into a werewolf. After looking at her, he remarks that she's not as big as his dog, Deng Chil, which irritates her. She doesn't respond, and he realizes it's because her mouth structure changes when she transforms, which makes speech impossible. Then they play a little, after he checks her up. After finishing her checkup, he's found in his study preparing for the second part of the procedure. He needs to know the ingredients in the poison to determine the exact amount he should use on Agni to paralyze her tail. He considers asking Kuzman for the ingredients but rejects the idea, knowing he can't trust him. Instead, he decides to store it in his mana slots. As soon as he opens his mouth to test it, his organs start screaming at him to stop. In their realm, they're worried about Raquiel, which seems intent on testing this poison on himself. His liver in particular is anxious, knowing he's risking his health with this dangerous experiment. His liver adds that he will be the one who has to detoxify the poison Raquiel plans to take. His liver shouts at him to test it on a summoned creature instead. In response, he exclaims that they're cruel to think he would test poison on such a cute little thing. His organs protest again, insisting that he can't use his body as a test subject. Then, his liver informs him that there are some summoned beings specialized in analyzing ingredients, including the poisons. Liver's statement makes him pause and consider the suggestion. The liver adds that he met this particular summoned creature once while waiting in the waiting room. This piques our boy's curiosity, who asks about this waiting room. The liver explains that it's a place where unawakened organs and unsummoned creatures rest in a dormant state. This piques his interest, but both his liver and his system inform him that access to this information is restricted, so he can't explore it further. He then tries to coax the liver into revealing the traits of that summoned creature, as he is hoping to get an advantage when it's time to summon his next creature. The liver nonchalantly refuses, and the other organs begin to laugh at his expense, which irritates him. Subsequently, he decides to show his organs who's boss by holding his breath. As soon as he does so, his lungs and heart start to panic from the lack of oxygen and are on the verge of losing consciousness. Seeing them like this, his liver finally tells him the trait of the summon he wants. After a while, he successfully summons a sunfish named Bobok. He watches Bebobok playing with Gosium, then lures Bebobok to taste the capsule containing the poison by telling him it has a great taste. This earns him the title of Heartless from his organs. He then focuses on his summon, who has eaten the poison. Bebobok has the ability of immortality, so even if it eats poison, it revives and writes down everything in a journal it has eaten. Therefore, Bebobok revives and writes down every trait of the venom on a card with teary eyes. By interpreting the traits and ingredients of the venom, our dude concludes that this kind of venom has the ability to weaken Botox because of its potential. Now he's ready to accurately prepare the venom which he needs to paralyze Agnes's tail. He calls for Garden, who appears in front of him out of nowhere. Garden is shocked to see another summon besides his master. Our guy makes a terrible lie, while saying the summon came here looking for him because he's quite famous. At that, Garden comments that Raquiel reminds him of a great person named Lloyd Frontera. This man was the builder who transformed this kingdom into an empire. Our guy agrees, as he has read about him that this legendary builder had 5 summoned creatures. Cautiously, our boy asks whether Lloyd was truly a great person. Garden explains that Lloyd laid the foundation of the empire but was known as someone who was popular on Fridays. Our boy doesn't understand the meaning behind Garden's words and orders him to bring Agnes there. While Garden escorts Agnes to the Crown Prince's room, she doubts whether Raquiel has really found a solution to her problem. Seeing Garden, she comments that he looks nervous. He retorts that the same could be said about her. She accuses him, while saying that it's because he saw her tail. Realizing his mistake, he apologizes, which lightens her mood, and they formally introduce themselves to each other. After this, they move forward. When they're near the room, he nervously tells her that she might be shocked after learning about the treatment procedure the Crown Prince has prepared for her. This makes her ponder over the expected treatment she'll receive. She enters and our guy offers her a seat. As she settles herself, she expresses her doubts about whether he could truly find a solution within a day. He answers affirmatively while asking her to trust him. She's still nervous and asks him to explain his method of treatment. He casually tells her that he's going to poke her tail with a needle multiple times, then inject poison into it. Hearing his method, everyone cheers for him. On the other hand, she first looks at Gardine, who asks her to trust Raquiel, then looks around at everyone else, who expresses the same trust in him. She shouts in her mind that they're all crazy, including the prince. On the other hand, Agnes doesn't find him trustworthy, but decides to give it a shot for the betterment of her kinsman, who won't have to suffer anymore if the treatment is successful. For this purpose, she decides to take a ride. When she agrees to have a treatment, the maids cover her body and take out her tail from the hole they made in a sheet. When he goes to check her up, he is once again amazed by the Azrahan core technique, which helps him see acupoints that are not possible to detect with any modern machine. He always yearns to know the acupoint's existence when he practices traditional medicine treatment in his world. He then starts the treatment by infecting the needle into the Xuanshu acupoint and pouring 0.01 ml of muscle-paralyzing poison from his slot. Next, he injects it into the Mingmen point. Finally, he injects the poison 2.4 center deep into the Yao Yangquan acupoint. Now, he has opened the path for mana to flow through the Xuanshu point, where it will flow to both sides of the erector spine. But the problem isn't just paralyzing the tail, but maintaining this paralysis as well. Therefore, as expected, the tail recovers itself. So, our guy speeds up the process. At last, he pokes her Nadkong point, which quite irritates Agnes as she can't believe he's trying to mess with her head. At the same time, her tail gets limp in its place, but at the same moment, her pinky toe moves from its place. With that, he exclaims that he has completed the process, which is a success. Agnes gets up from her bed, with an uncertain expression on her face regarding the treatment. Our boy asks whether she feels something different with her tail. Her eyes widen as she sees her limp tail, which should be moving to show her unease. Rakiel explains that he has paralyzed the nerve of her tail and directed it to her pinky toe because now it will work as her tail. Then she starts to cry because of all the built-up emotions she and her kind have to carry because of their so-called tails. His eyes soften as he sees that, and he asks her if she's finished thanking him and whether they should sign the hiring contracts. He also adds that she should bring her tribe here as they had already discussed. Then he coaxed her into signing the contract. By looking at his face, she concludes that he is not some ordinary person. After a few days, our hero was laughing like a maniac. Garden commented on his overwhelming happiness. He exclaimed that he had finally gotten 50 werewolf nurses. The said nurses are receiving professional nursing training, where they are taught basic nursing techniques and emergency treatment. They are also taught about herbs and medicine, how to store them, and how to make tonics. In this way, they are trained to be ready to run the hospital. At this moment, one of the nurses had shown him the shift schedule. He have smirked with satisfaction at their progress. Now, finally, his clinic is operating 24 hours. Not only this, but the tribe was used to getting their toes to move, instead of their tails. At that moment, his system congratulates him for the success of the toe operation, but he doesn't get any life bonus as it wasn't a matter of life and death. However, he gets a standing ovation from his organs. Then he is informed that his new organ has just been activated. Therefore, his stomach, in the form of a very chubby baby, has been awakened. As soon as it enters into the organ realm, it demands different junk food from modern world. He first demands variety of junk food, then Japanese ones that only exist in this modern world. Our boy expresses that he also wants to eat these things, but they don't exist in this world. Then he tells his stomach to hold himself. At that point, his stomach compromises on a sweet. He eats the candy while thinking that his stomach has the taste of an elementary schooler. To have this, his stomach gives him 300 HP. Then his other organs, happy to find their youngest member, give him 700 HP, and now he has 1000 HP. He's happy to see his organs ready for the consultation, as now he can deal with the stomach problem as well. His system also informs him that his Azrahan technique has leveled up because of his precise control in treating werewolf tails. With that, his mana increases, and his mana circle expands, which gives him the feeling of a growing water balloon in his chest. Overall, he's content with the high amount of HP he has received today. Meanwhile, he's interrupted by a nurse who informs him about a patient with a fever and a strange smell. He proceeds to check on the patient, while feeling content that he has finally laid a solid foundation for his clinic. The scene shifts to Sir Pavard, who is the chief butler of the side palace. He's working on something when suddenly his expression turns horrified as he checks a record and wonders where he went wrong. He can't believe they've screwed up. After realizing it, he immediately rushes to the Crown Prince's office and shouts at him. Our prince immediately looks for his doctor, who's usually the one to startle him. But this time, it's the butler who apologizes for his rude visit. He whispers that they're out of budget to operate the side palace, which makes the prince scream, asking how that's possible since he is the Crown Prince. He's quite tense upon hearing this, as he can't operate the traditional clinic that extends his lifespan in this way. He asks about the reasons behind it. The butler informs him that it's because he cut a large chunk of the side palace budget last autumn. Upon hearing this, the prince curses Rakiel. After a while, the butler informs him about the reason behind his budget-cutting decision. The prince first thinks he won't live long. Secondly, he hadn't been using the budget, since he's hardly out of bed. The butler informs him that he should be happy, as his health is much better than last year. He comments dryly that he's not happy at all. He lies down on the floor, while thinking about how broke he is now and how life is all about money. Then, he thinks about Rakiel, who should be blamed for this fiasco. He decides to find a solution to the problem, as he can understand why Rakiel did it. But grumbling about it isn't going to get him anywhere. He then turns to his butler and asks whether they can request more money for operating budget. But the butler replies that it's not possible, which makes his expression grim. At this moment, he confesses that without operating the side palace traditional medicine clinic, he'll be dead. The butler asks how his death is related to the operation of the clinic. Instead of answering, he sighs and asks whether they really can't request more budget. The butler answers that it's against the law, as they can only make a request at the end of the year. However, the only person who's an exception to the law is his father. He enthusiastically decides to ask his father for help. However, he returns empty-handed, as his father isn't interested in helping him. He feels like history is repeating itself when he had to close his clinic because of a lack of money. But this time, he's determined not to be stopped by financial issues. He then asks for the assets of the side palace. The butler asks why he needs them. He exclaims that he's going to sell everything, including paintings, silver, and gold cutlery. The butler is quite sad to see these things, which he's cared for so long about to be sold. He once again asks the Crown Prince to reconsider his decision. But the ever-cruel prince answers negatively, which prompts a hateful remark from the butler. A few days later, he turns to his trusted men about the issue of a budget. They've sold the luxury items, but it's not a permanent solution to their problem. He adds that they've gained some temporary relief from the funds they got from selling luxury items, but if they don't do anything to extend their funds, they'll eventually be eaten up as well. The butler points out that there's nothing left to sell anymore. He deadpans that they're going to sell medicine from now on, which leaves both of his men speechless. Seeing their expressions, he exclaims that he's going to be a crown prince who sells medicine. Meanwhile, at Frontera Plaza, people are gossiping about the news regarding the side palace. They're all in awe to hear that the crown prince sold all of the luxury items just to keep the medicine clinic running. They're totally impressed by our hero and begin to worship him, as they've never seen anyone in history do such a thing for the sake of treating people. They start singing songs in his greatness. Meanwhile, at the side clinic, they're discussing the matter of earning money through selling medicine. Raquel thinks that it's a necessary measure for keep him alive. The butler points out that if the budget is the problem, then they should charge a small fee from the patients. But he rejects this thought, as not many people will come for treatment if that's the case. He needs as much life bonus as he can get. He then expresses that he's going to sell very expensive and effective medicine that people might buy just for display purposes. In other words, he's going to launch his own medicine brand. Any rich household will be proud to have his branded medicine. He exclaims at the end that he's going to sell super luxury medicine, which becomes the symbol of a person's luxury and high status in society. Listening to him, both of his subordinates are quite blank. The butler asks whether such medicine even exists at all. He explains that this is a medicine called the Golden Minotaur Calming Pill, made from the gallstone of a minotaur. Basically, Koreans are used to using calming pills to calm their nerves, and this pill is also used for curing brain illnesses, heart problems, and high blood pressure. On his way, he explains the details of this medicine to Damien, who has doubts about whether people are really going to purchase it. He replies that they're definitely going to buy it because he's going to present it as something rare. Like a limited edition, they'll buy it at all costs, as it's the psychology of people. He adds that he's not going to use bull, but the gallstone of the minotaur, which will urge them to buy it. However, his confidence is shattered by Damien's words of disbelief, who doesn't think anyone will buy it. Damien again points out that if this medicine is so effective, why hasn't he heard of it? Raquel answers that it's because it comes from the fallen kingdom called Jasion. Damien dryly remarks that he hasn't heard of this kingdom either. Our prince chimes in that he heard about it in his dream, and all the medicine he's learning is from his dream. While looking at his back, Damien thinks that Garden is a naive person who's going to believe every bit of nonsense their crown prince throws at him. But in his case, he only cares about getting his salary on time. He then runs after him and asks whether he's going to treat people without a license, which makes the prince halt in his steps. Damien stresses that he needs to pass the doctor exam to get the license like Garden did. The prince turns to Damien and nervously chuckles, while admitting that he didn't know about it. Damien replies that they need to solve the funding problem first. For this purpose, they need a gallstone of a minotaur, but the prince interjects that they don't have any at the herbal store. It seems like people there aren't using the bull for making medicine. Damien asks about his solution to this problem. The prince exclaims that he's going to buy a live minotaur for this purpose. So he's going to Cremo to attend the monster auction at the auction house to get this minotaur. Damien can't believe he's planning to go there himself. The prince answers calmly that he has to, because he needs to check the quality of the minotaur as well as its gallstone by himself. Damien thinks, smiling to himself, that this man is crazy. At that moment, Agnes arrives with a carriage and gestures them to get in. Damien asks in disbelief if they're really going to depart now. The prince replies that time is more precious to him than gold. He then urges Damien to get in before Garden comes after them. Once the carriage is on its way, Garden comes running, while yelling them that how he could leave him like this. The prince yells back that he needs him to stay behind to take care of the clinic. While on their way, Damien comments on the comfort of the horse carriage. Our prince arrogantly replies that it's what one would expect from a crown prince's carriage. It's shown that they're actually lying down in coffin-like spaces, and Damien still insists that it feels strange. Their journey carries on for 8 days. And one evening, Agnes gets up from her spot on top of the carriage, her senses heightened. As soon as she smells the sea, she informs the prince that they've reached Cremo Port. Finally, they reach the Cremo Monster Auction House. A boy in front of the auction house tells the driver to park his carriage somewhere else. But the driver gets down from the carriage and warns him that he doesn't know whose carriage it is. He asks if it belongs to the crown prince. At that same moment, the said crown prince greets him from the carriage window, which leaves him petrified. The next moment, the boy rushes inside the auction building and approaches the mayor. He points toward Raquel and informs him about his arrival, which panics the mayor as well. The next moment, he starts flattering our boy to gain political favor. When our boy mentions that he's here to purchase something, the mayor immediately offers him additional bodyguards, which our boy refuses because he has his own. He tries to excuse himself, but the mayor keeps trying to prolong their conversation. He goes ahead, after giving the mayor a false promise that he'll visit his home afterward. The mayor instructs others to clean everything, while our guy thinks it feels like a military commander is going to visit there. During the auction, Raquiel and Damien settle themselves while noticing the quiet atmosphere. Damien explains that it's likely because monsters can wake up if the auction gets too noisy. As people make bids, he waits for the Minotaur to appear. When it seems like the auction might be ending, he wonders if he might not find a Minotaur there after all. At that moment, a carriage rolls in, carrying a caged, hefty Minotaur. Our dude is awestruck by the Minotaur's weight and strength. The host announces that it's the main item of the auction, which is captured by the 7 best hunting teams. On the other hand, our guy's excitement at the prospect of getting his hands on this beast deflates when the host announces the starting bid at 50,000 magan. He asks his aide if he heard correctly, since other monsters sold for 50,000 magan, yet this one starts at 50,000 magan. When Damien asks if he has enough money, he considers that he brought 100,000 magan. But seeing the crowd's eagerness to buy the Minotaur, he doubts he'll be able to win it. Besides, he thinks that it's way too expensive to buy a Minotaur at that price. After a moment's thought, he turns to Damien and whispers his plan in his ear. It's clear that Damien doesn't like the idea and double-checks if he really wants to go through with it. After a confirmation from him, Damien comments that the idea sounds like something a thug would suggest, but he just chuckles, while saying that it doesn't matter if he's compared to a thug as long as it will work. Then Damien leaves, and our guy watches the auction with anticipation as the bidding price climbs. He hopes Damien returns before the price gets too high. After a while, the mayor arrives and greets him, and our prince pretends to be surprised to see him. Seeing the prince's expression, the mayor catches on as he understands that the prince wants everyone's attention right now. Eager to gain the prince's favor, the mayor is more than willing to play along. The mayor then loudly addresses the crown prince, while offering him 100 bodyguards. As soon as he says this, everyone turns to see if it's really the crown prince. Our guy formally accepts the favor, while Damien stands there with a very annoyed expression, watching the drama unfold in front of him. Then, our guy dramatically remembers that he has to participate in the auction and places a bid of 60,000. Our prince's expression loudly declares that he's the crown prince, and no one is going to raise the price against him. Seeing this, the audience realizes that they have to give up on getting the Minotaur. Meanwhile, the host is also quite nervous, seeing that they may have to sell their best item for only 60,000 magan. Then there's a twist as one noble dares to raise the bid to 70,000 magan, which shocks everyone, including our dear crown prince. Someone then notices that this person is none other than Guinness, a favorite of the king of the southern country, Amboise. Meanwhile, Guinness thinks that since he's not even a citizen of this country, the prince can't do much to him. Everyone wants to cheer for him as their savior, while some whisper that they've heard the crown prince is famous for holding grudges for a very long time. On the other side, our guy is fuming with anger, now determined to have a proper clash with this person. Burning with desire to get his hands on the Minotaur, he raises his bid to 71,000. Guinness raises it by another 1,000, bringing the bid up to 80,000. The bidding continues like this. Finally, the host announces that their main item has been sold for 250,000 magan, and the winner is Guinness, who is quite obnoxious about having the upper hand over the crown prince. Meanwhile, our hero looks like someone just drained all color from his face. At this moment, Damien tries to console him, while saying that he's glad Raquiel didn't spend all his money on a single Minotaur. Hearing this, our guy's expression shifts to confidence about his finances, but in reality, Damien is secretly worried about getting his salary on time. He's completely flabbergasted when Damien remarks that he's only sticking around as long as he can count on a stable paycheck. He reminds Damien that he was the one who rescued him from the underground life. Damien replies that he's grateful for that, but having a stable salary is a completely different matter. Our guy then looks at his bodyguard thoughtfully, recalling the last chapter he read in Demon Sword. After reading it, he concluded that Damien is the strongest person in this world, and it's reassuring to have him by his side. But there seems to be another reason related to victory in the final battle, which somehow connects to Damien, because our boy believes that giving him a stable life leads to the stability and safety of the world. He then tells his bodyguard earnestly that he'll make sure Damien gets his salary on time. Next, he turns to the mayor as they head to his home, but the mayor protests while asking his reason to be in such a rush. He replies that it's out of embarrassment for losing even after using cheap tricks. The scene shifts to a grand house, where in one room, the Minotaur is bound after being sold today. Guinness steps forward to check its condition, bragging about his victory over the crown prince. Then, someone else enters the picture, the most expert taxidermist in Cremo, who is brought in for this job. The taxidermist asks Guinness about his preferred taxidermy style. Guinness replies that he wants it presented as grand as possible because he's planning to gift it to the king for his birthday. He then requests a mage to assist with the taxidermy, and at that moment, the mage enters, while stating that they should begin immediately without wasting time. The mage starts his vacuum magic to kill the Minotaur in a clean manner. As he's being killed, the Minotaur thinks of his family and laments how cruel humans are for mistreating him this way. While thinking, he's broken their magic, and then it snaps the chain he was bound to. Meanwhile, in the mayor's house, our guy crashes onto his bed, looking exhausted. His whole body protests from the grueling schedule. Determined to buy the Minotaur tomorrow, he insists he'll manage with 1 lakh magan, though his bodyguard doesn't seem convinced. Their conversation is interrupted by one of his men, who warns him of upcoming trouble for which they need to evacuate immediately. Rakiel demands an explanation. At that same moment, the wall is smashed open. Damien is in front of him instantly, ready to protect the prince, but the monster throws him aside. As the dust clears, our guy is petrified to see that the monster is none other than the Minotaur. A few moments ago, with the force of the Minotaur's break from Mage's magic, everyone is knocked down around it except for the evil Guinness. He shouts at the Minotaur, while claiming that it can't harm him because he's its master. But the monster doesn't understand the meaning of master, and starts to chase him instead. While looking for an escape route, Guinness spots the mayor's house and decides to take refuge inside. He hides behind a wall and shouts in an attempt to distract the Minotaur. In a way, he's somewhat successful at it. Now the Minotaur is right in front of the guy, ready to smash him. Our dude is ready to escape. But suddenly he notices its eyes and stops for a moment. They seem like the eyes of a creature in pain, suffering greatly, much like one of his patient. The Minotaur then remembers that our boy is the same guy who bit on it, and in a fit of rage, it attacks him. However, its strike is intercepted by Damien's sword, who urges the prince to escape. Our boy exclaims that he's not going to die after having it so difficult to survive this long. Damien tries to deal with the Minotaur, but he's not successful in stopping or defeating it. During the battle, he pushes Rakiel back, who slams into a wall. At the same time, Damien meets up with him, and he states that they're trapped here, prompting a sarcastic remark from our boy, who dryly comments that he can see that as well. Next moment, Damien stands with a serious expression and asks for an extra bonus if they manage to get out of there alive. Our boy shouts at him, asking why he's asking for this now, and what if he doesn't provide it. Damien responds that he'll escape alone if necessary. He then tells the prince that he's going to fight the Minotaur, which will give him an opening to escape. Rakiel hesitates, as the path to escape is blocked. Damien nonchalantly suggests that he should just jump from there, but that's not an option for our boy. Damien adds that it's better to jump from there than to be crushed alive. He then explains that if he's injured, the guards will rescue him and take him to safety. With that, Damien attacks the Minotaur, and they engage in battle. The prince tries to escape through the opening Damien created, his face twisted with anxiety. But in his misery, he doesn't notice that, instead of climbing a wall, he's scaling the Minotaur itself. He stops when he receives a warning from his system. His system gives him a full scan of the monster. His system and heart both inform him that the results show the monster's heart is in very bad condition. It has stable angina pectoris, which means the monster is suffering from chest pain, and its heart is about to clog up. Clinging to the monster, he realizes he's not in good condition to treat it, and he's in danger himself. He can't jump, or his body will be crushed in the process. Meanwhile, the Minotaur has a plan to crush the prince with its other hand, like squashing a mosquito, but it's distracted by Damien's attack, which misses its eye. Damien tells the prince to hang on, while promising that he'll rescue him in a moment. Our crying boy pleads for him to do it quickly. Damien rushes toward the monster, looking for an opening to attack its shoulder or sides. He strikes the monster and tries to rescue the prince, but the prince is thrown from the balcony, which makes him believe he's about to die. However, our crown guy is rescued by Agnes, who catches him in midair. As soon as she lands on the ground, other guards come to escort him to a safe place. Meanwhile, Damien and the Minotaur are locked in combat. The monster focuses all its attention on Damien, who is determined to defeat it in order to claim a high reward. Damien plans to stab the Minotaur on its fist and then its arms as soon as it's about to punch him. He tries to cut into its fist and attack it as much as he can, but the Minotaur proves tougher than that. During their clash of sword and fist, something distracts Damien, and in the next moment, he's attacked by the Minotaur and thrown aside. He is pushed into the wall, and the Minotaur steps toward him. Damien tries to get up, but his leg is pinned under the rubble. At the same time, he's saved by Goswim's powerful body slam. He doesn't fully understand what's happening until he sees Goswim fighting the monster. Meanwhile, our guy thinks that he's not going to lose Damien, especially after all the trouble he went through to get him. That's why he fed Goswim red sunflower seeds to make him bigger, so he could fight the Minotaur. He shouts at his bodyguard to get up, as they're about to be surrounded, prompting a remark from him that he's going to get a lot of money. but unfortunately Damien can't move his leg. On the other side, the Minotaur throws Ghostwim into the air toward Damien. Seeing this, Rakiel shouts for Damien to hold on to Ghostwim in order to escape. Damien does so, and Ghostwim jumps from the second floor. Now, they're in front of the Crown Prince. But not just his friend but his enemy. The Minotaur also leaps from the second floor and howls at them, with everyone else following close behind. Rakiel asks about the well-being of Damien and Ghostwim. Damien answers that he's alright. He thinks about the Minotaur and wants the medicine from it. But he rejects the thought, as it could cost him his life. He then suggests to his companions that they head to a safer place. At this moment, the mayor interjects, stating that he's going to bring him and his companions to the safest place in the city. After a while, they arrive at the port. The mayor informs him that if they ride the ship, the Minotaur won't be able to chase them on the sea, and they can easily escape this way. Rakiel likes the idea and decides to escape this way. When they board the ship and offer the mayor to join them, our dude is shocked to hear that the mayor refuses to escape. With a serious expression, the mayor states that he won't run away because this city and the safety of its people are his responsibility. So, he will stay and guide the guards to counter their current problem. Hearing his words, Rakiel changes his opinion about the mayor, as he is no longer seeing him as a shallow man who just wanted to go on with his life. He now seems serious, and this makes Rakiel contemplate whether it's right for him to run away as well. Seeing his expression, Damien understands his inner turmoil and stresses that they need to depart. He reminds Rakiel that everyone has their own role to play, so he doesn't need to feel guilty. At that moment, Rakiel realizes that his bodyguard is right. The mayor's role is to protect the city, while his own role is to protect the imperial family. For this purpose, he has to survive. So, he orders the anchor to be raised. However, just as their luck runs out, the Minotaur arrives, chasing after them. It leaps onto the ship, while howling with anger. It tears apart the ship and swings the wood over their heads. Rakiel orders everyone to get down to avoid being hit by it. Meanwhile, Rakiel is also thinking about his next course of action, as they have no way out of this situation now. On the other hand, his organs are shivering as they sense the danger around them. He tries to think of a plan to escape, but is on the verge of tears when he realizes he hasn't awakened his brain. Damien jumps beside him and tells him to get to the deck and stay hidden there. Rakiel asks what Damien will do in the meantime. While unsheathing his sword and turning toward the Minotaur, Damien claims he's about to make a lot of money from this fight, so the Minotaur better get to work to earn it. Damien rushes toward the monster and calls for Agnes's help. But their combined efforts, along with some guards, go in vain as they are all thrown aside by the Minotaur, which remains standing tall. Seeing everything unfold, Rakiel panics for a moment. But then he pulls himself together and looks closely at the Minotaur, while analyzing its health condition to figure out how to defeat it. At this moment, his system informs him that he has strengthened his Azrahan core to its limit due to being in an unprecedented and extremely dangerous situation. As a result, he has acquired a skill called Acupoint Scan, where his Azrahan core technique is combined with his pulse reading skill. This allows him to see the acupoints of every living thing in order to predict their movements. Now he applies this skill to the Minotaur standing in front of him, which makes him realize that he can clearly dodge its every move. However, the problem is his stamina, as he can't keep up with this for long. With a tense expression, Rakiel ponders a way out for himself and everyone else. Meanwhile, he notices Gosuem and gets an idea, though he's a little uncertain about whether it will work. But he decides to go for it anyway, because he believes it's his role to protect everyone as the Crown Prince. So, when the Minotaur is about to attack a sailor, Rakiel rushes in from the front to block its strike. His system warns him that he has eaten the red sunflower seeds meant for his summoning. Our boy really becomes a giant with the red flower seed, and now has a one-on-one with this monster. However, his system informs him that he is not a summon, so he must have side effects from eating the red flower seed. He needs to consult the doctor immediately. He dryly reminds his system that he is a traditional medicine doctor. His system then informs him that his giant form will last only 3 minutes, and he will fall into a coma once it ends as a side effect. Now he understands the severity of the situation as he has to end this fight within 2.5 minutes, which he is sure he can't do, and he might meet his end. As expected, the Minotaur gives him a hard punch in his face. He complains about how much it hurts, but normally he would be killed by this attack, so there is still hope. In order to test his hope, he hits the Minotaur with his head and hurts himself as well. Now it seems impossible to end this fight in the limited time. He needs to think quickly. He looks at his summon, who is exhausted because of the fight. He wonders if his guards can handle it, but what if he faints? He has to do something quickly. He asks Gusium to provide some thorns. After getting them, he grabs the Minotaur's neck in his arm as he is going to use acupoints on him. He pierces the first needle into the Tianyu point near its neck. This point is used for ascending and descending mana, but unfortunately, our guy can't pierce the thorn deep enough to reach Minotaur's mana flow. He then orders Damien to attack the end of the thorn, and Damien does so immediately. His next target is to calm the monster down mentally. To do this, he reduces the stimulation of the sympathetic nerve and increases the stimulation of the parasympathetic nerves. He then targets another acupoint and asks Damien to dig the needle deeper. After a while, he targets several acupoints in order to prick its blood and energy flow. He jokingly thinks that the Minotaur is behaving like a kid who doesn't want to get a shot. So now, he will give it a sweet if it behaves during the last acupoint, which is the ermine point. This point is used for ear disorders. With this last point, suddenly the monster calms down as its pain disappears. Our boy says that it was kind of a coincidence as well. To realize that his pain has disappeared, the Minotaur turns to our guy and thanks him, thinking he's the reason the pain is gone. At this moment, our dude falls down, whining that he's incredibly tired. He checks his internal organs, which are also protesting because the sudden size change disrupted their blood and breathing flow. At this moment, his time as a giant ends, and he returns to his normal size. Everyone gathers around him in concern. Before slipping into a coma, he tells them that he will be in a coma for 5 days, and that they don't need to worry about the Minotaur anymore. Then, his coma period begins. After the fight, the Minotaur is subdued, and everyone becomes worried about saving the ship, as it could sink at any moment. They have to head to the deck immediately since the ship is filling with water. Suddenly, the ship begins to move, and everyone thinks it might be sinking. Meanwhile, the Minotaur, who wants to repay the kindness the Crown Prince showed him, picks him up and places him on his head in order to save him. This stuns everyone around them, as they think it's trying to kidnap the Crown Prince. 6 days have passed since the kidnapping of the Crown Prince, and now we see a dark room where Damien sits in a chair. While looking at the rat at his feet, he wonders whether he is dreaming, which is something he hasn't done in a long time. His thought process is interrupted by the inspection squad interrogator. It seems like he's being interrogated because of what happened with Raquiel and the Minotaur. The interrogator taunts him, while asking if he's sleeping in a situation like this. Damien makes an excuse while saying that it's because he hasn't slept for days. The inspector shouts at him, saying it's been 6 days since the Minotaur kidnapped Raquiel. The next day, the news reached the Emperor, and it took him 2 days to reach this city. The interrogator accuses them of doing nothing in the meantime, as they haven't found any clues about where the Minotaur took the Crown Prince, or where the person who brought the Minotaur has gone. He then changes his statement, in which he accuses them of doing it intentionally because they wanted to harm the prince. At that, Damien taunts him, inquiring whether he thinks every person who accompanied the Crown Prince is a conspirator, working with the Minotaur to kidnap him. He is furious to know that this interrogator is going to conclude such a ridiculous notion. However, the interrogator seems more interested in wrapping up the case neatly and tells Damien that this ridiculous conclusion could be the answer to the question of who is responsible for the kidnapping of the Crown Prince. So, he plans to blame everyone, including the mayor and the people who accompanied the prince, as being responsible for the kidnapping, which would conveniently close the case. Damien grits his teeth, while thinking that this inspector just wants to close the case without any complications, which is why he's accusing them of being involved. The interrogator slyly tries to coax him into confessing, as he offers mercy in the form of a swift death. Damien angrily tells him to go to hell, but the interrogator, with an impish expression, replies that he has other ways to make him confess. Then, he is put into a cage, which is hanging, and he finds Agnes and the mayor in their respective cages as well. He notices that they have ignited a fire below them, and after smelling the oil, now he wonders whether they're going to burn them alive. The interrogator once again tries to coax them into confessing that they're the culprits, but Damien insists that if they want something from him, he can tell them the truth. He angrily tells the interrogator that he is the one obstructing the search for the Crown Prince under the pretense of the investigation. He angrily agrees that he is more than eager to find him. After hearing this, the inspector orders his subordinate to light the fire. Meanwhile, Damien thinks that he doesn't want to die this meaningless death. Before anyone can do anything, they see the Minotaur coming toward them, and to everyone's astonishment, it holds Damien's cage. Above the Minotaur, the Crown Prince is riding, who asks his subordinates the reason for them being caged. It seems like the Crown Prince wakes up after 6 days on the island, where he finds Eurus, who was once his enemy, but now looks at him with loving eyes. After taking some time, they resolve their differences and become friends. He then thinks that it's a coincidence that Eurus's pain was soothed by him, but he doesn't clarify it to it because he wants it to follow him willingly. Then he tells Eurus that he wants to help it in return, as well as its chest pain will start soon, so they should begin treating it. He starts his acupoint scan and concludes that his angina isn't very advanced yet, so it can be treated later. Then he turns his scan to the gallbladder. He asks Eurus whether he feels full after his meal, to which he gets a positive answer. He adds that it's because he's filled his gallbladder with lots of stuff, so it needs to be emptied. Then he explains the process, but Urus doesn't understand a word and looks at him blankly. Finally, the Crown Prince decides to use simpler language and asks Urus to press the spot he points to with his finger. He gestures for Urus to clench its fist and hit its solar plexus. Urus seems hesitant, but the prince urges it to do so. It does, and by observing its condition, the prince concludes that something must be stuck inside. Finally, it's revealed to be a big piece of cholecystitis. The Crown Prince is happy to have found this significant piece. He asks Urus about the condition of his bloating, and Urus answers with a cheerful tone. The prince happily responds, as he is glad that it's nothing serious, and that now he has owned the Minotaur as well. He then asks Urus to go back with him, as they need to save his comrades, but Urus is hesitant to return because he fears they might fight again. The Crown Prince consoles him, while assuring him that no one will harm him. On their way back, he spots the flag of the inspection squad, which answers directly to the Emperor, and concludes that their choice to return earlier was the right one. Back in the present, Raquiel is shouting at the squad to tell him who is in charge of the inspection. The devil of an interrogator casually answers that he's in charge, which irritates the prince. Not only this interrogator has the guts to accuse the Crown Prince of not being one, just because he brought a Minotaur into the city. Everyone looks at him with bewildered expressions, while wondering what he's doing. Raquiel retorts that this implies he's dealing with a doppelganger who's pretending to be the Crown Prince. The interrogator responds that it might be the case, as there could be forces wanting to harm the imperial family, especially with the Crown Prince missing. Now the real Crown Prince needs to verify his identity. This infuriates Raquiel to his core. He says that if they want to verify his identity, they should also verify the true faces of his people. To demonstrate his point, he starts with Damien, who had thrown himself between the Crown Prince and the Minotaur to buy him time. His fight with the Minotaur showed his loyalty and devotion. Meanwhile, Urus had broken his cage, allowing Damien to emerge from it. Then he turns to Agnes, who quickly catches him before he falls from the second floor. If she hadn't been there, he might be a dead person. Next moment, she is freed from the cage as well. As she steps in front of him, he says that she shows great courage and sacrifice. Then he turns to Sergio, who is his knight captain, and the first one rushing to get him to safety. He then looks at the other guards and describes their sacrifices and the effort they showed during the fight. Listening to this, the royal guards discuss that he might be the real Crown Prince, but are confused about how he managed to survive. On the other hand, dread is clearly visible on the face of the interrogator because he was sure the Crown Prince isn't coming. That's why he blames everyone in his party in order to close the case. This is how he's always done things. Because when an important person dies, someone must be blamed for it. At this, he bows before the prince and starts begging for forgiveness, while realizing that he's dared to question his identity verification. However, the Crown Prince remains unfazed by his drama and turns to the mayor, who chose to stay with his city to protect them rather than run away. He then approaches the cage and states that the mayor is the best example of how nobility should fulfill their duties. He then turns to the interrogator again and angrily exclaims that meanwhile, the head of the investigation squad is questioning his identity. He warns him dangerously that it is his people, who have stayed by his side regardless of the circumstances, who have made him the Crown Prince. He stops him from making any excuses, already knowing what they will be. He reflects on the situation in Korea, where a similar incident had occurred. In the end, he concludes that the interrogator will be held responsible for the farce of the investigation he conducted. The next day, everyone gathers on the shore, gossiping about the latest news. Their hot topics include the investigator who's been accused of hindering the search for the Crown Prince. He is likely going to be either hanged or sentenced to life in prison. They also discuss the Crown Prince's skill to tame the fierce Minotaur, who has become obedient to him. A young boy claims that he saw the Crown Prince grow as big as the Minotaur and fight with it. Not only that, he also adds that the prince poked thorns into the Minotaur's body. This story, however, isn't believed by anyone. Then the discussion shifts to another rumor about the Crown Prince as people in the capital are gossiping about him becoming the next ruler. Meanwhile, Damien is watching all of this from his window. He turns to his master and asks how he could possibly tame a Minotaur. Raquiel explains that he never actually tamed it, while explaining that it was all a misunderstanding on the Minotaur's part. Seeing Damien's confusion, Raquiel further clarifies that when he grew and poked the Minotaur with the thorns, its pain lessened, leading it to believe that Raquiel must be its savior. For a while, they discuss how this misunderstanding works in Damien's favor, as he can now earn some handsome rewards which a prospect he's not ashamed to entertain. Yet, Damien feels a little embarrassed about not truly defeating the Minotaur, so he resolves to train harder. Damien then informs him that he wants more money because he has also completed the task he was given by the Crown Prince. He supplies that he's quite glad to hear that he's collected all kinds of medicinal ingredients. Damien explains that it's because Cremo is a larger port and a commercial city. Then he drops a bomb on our prince, revealing that his father returned to the capital as soon as he heard that his son was safely back. The prince doesn't like his father's heartlessness over this, but he remembers his father's words and concludes that he can't do much about it. So he ignores this thought as he focuses on his task at hand and asks Damien to bring all of that medicine here as he is about to start. Upon receiving the supplies, he exclaims that he's going to prepare the golden minotaur pills in the mayor's kitchen. After a while, he's in the kitchen humming and cutting ingredients to prepare the medicine, which annoys Damien. Finally, he has made the golden minotaur pills and decides to experiment it on himself. As soon as he eats one, his system informs him about the pill's effects, while revealing that his internal organs have become more energized. However, his stomach doesn't appreciate the taste. In return, though, he gains 500 more HP from his organs. Not only that, his tonic concoction analysis skill activates because he made the pill himself. After reviewing the long list of benefits from the pill, he feels quite happy to see that it not only treats cardiac disease, but also provides natural sleep without any side effects. Reading this, he feels ecstatic about the results. The next day he goes to Eurus and asks how it's feeling. Then, he gives it the pills to help soothe its chest pain. Without hesitation, Urus eats them all. It feels extremely energized from the pills, and their effectiveness increases by 10% after he uses them to heal the Minotaur, who is his patient now. Not only that, he gains a life bonus of 7 days and an additional 600 HP from his organs. Later, he is lying on the Minotaur leisurely, planning to counting on his Minotaur from now on. The next day, a large crowd gathers in Cremo City Plaza for the award distribution ceremony honoring those who helped him that night. That morning, Rakiel makes a grand entrance, riding in on Urus. Seeing him, the crowd confirms that he's likely to become their next king. Unbeknownst to their discussion, Rakiel begins the ceremony, while recalling that the last time he received this much attention was during his fight with his brother, so he doesn't want him to feel afraid. He starts the ceremony by addressing his bodyguards and complimenting the bravery they displayed that night when they fought against a Minotaur. To acknowledge their efforts, he's going to give them his golden medicine. With a smirk, he praises the mayor in his mind, who solved his problem. The scene flashes back to 2 days ago when he's resting with Eurus and the mayor approaches him. Rakiel explains to him that he's going to hold an award ceremony to honor those who worked hard that night, not only to acknowledge their efforts, but also as a way to advertise his medicine. He then shows him the medicine he plans to give to his subordinates. The mayor immediately understands that Rakiel has ulterior motives and realizes what he wants to do. He suggests that if Rakiel gives the medicine as a reward, it will definitely make the nobles curious about it. He even planned to create a special premium edition in Crown Prince's name. He also understands that he needs to make this ceremony as grand as possible to attract future customers and increase the value of the medicine. With that, the mayor rushes off, while asking for 2 days to organize the ceremony to his liking. Now at the ceremony, Rakiel is pleased to see the results of the mayor's efforts. First, he acknowledges the bravery and efforts of his subordinates who fought that night, then subtly shifts the topic to describe the benefits of his medicine, which is made from the Minotaur's gallstone. He explains that it grants stamina as great as the Minotaur's while curing numerous other diseases. He even flashes his pet to prove his point. He adds that people who can't sleep will also find rest with this medicine, while slipping in more praise for his subordinates. Then, he shamelessly turns back to advertising the medicine, even announcing a limited offer which they can get it at an affordable price of only $9.99 Megan for 1 month. Seeing this, Agnes and Damien realize that he's acting like a con artist to lure in future customers. They glance at Sergio, who's also there to happily promote the Crown Prince. In the end, Rakiel shows the crowd several pamphlets to further advertise his medicine. Even after witnessing the shameless promotion of his medicine, many people still want to buy it. Some even consider borrowing money to purchase it, as it's quite expensive. Seeing the positive response from the crowd, he slyly decides to promote his tradition medicine clinic too. He fake coughs and addresses everyone, while immediately informing them about the existence of the Side Palace Traditional Medicine Clinic, which he runs. Many of his subordinates raise cards and pamphlets to advertise the clinic, and even Minotaur helps with the promotion. He adds that he has introduced new kinds of medicinal treatments at his clinic. He asks the audience if anyone has heard of it, and 2 people raise their hands. Seeing them, the prince conveys his relief that someone has heard of it, as he doesn't want to promote it by his words alone. Then, he decides to add a little flair to his advertising and starts talking about how beautiful and important the city of Cremo is, given its standing as the northern port and commercial hub. He emphasizes that it's essential for the city's people to be healthy to help the city prosper. His speech stirs everyone, making them emotional with his display of concern. He then dramatically offers them to visit his clinic, even for minor health issues, and promises to personally examine them. However, he understands that they're still hesitant, so he decides to push them further. He announces a free treatment coupon for the first 100 people who come, which prompts a protest from Agnes, as the clinic was free from the start. Seeing people racing toward him, he feels giddy at the sight of his bonus life in the form of potential patients. Soon, he's busy consulting on the health conditions of the people, while handing out coupons and offering advice. Not only that, he even covers their travel expenses and accommodation. After distributing all 100 coupons, his face brightens with pride at the success of his advertising. Seeing his happy expression, Agnes is on the verge of tears, noticing that he's even covering travel expenses for his patients. This means they'll need to sell everything to cover the cost. He doesn't realize it's been 9 hours, though his organs are begging him to let them rest now. Everything around him starts to blur, but he worries that he can't afford to lose his cool in front of everyone by fainting here. Instead of fainting, he falls down and begins to chuckle nervously as everyone rushes to him, while cursing his body's low stamina. His system informs him of what he's done, witnessed by the people of Cremo, along with his exhaustion. Seeing him like this, the people of Cremo feel touched by his dedication, and he's granted a new title. A new power is added to his traditional medicine skill called Great Doctor Point. This is a kind of reputation value in which, whenever he makes an impact on society through his medical practice, or people are touched by his effort and skill, he will earn 101 GDP. He understands this new point system but doesn't know where to use them. Upon hearing this, his system informs him that he can use these points to buy a lie voucher. With the help of the voucher, he can tell a lie to anyone, and they will believe him. Damien rushes to him and helps him stand. Meanwhile, he receives more information about the lie voucher. For example, he has to choose the person he plans to lie to. Additionally, each voucher can only be used once. Mythical creatures and people closer to him might not be affected by the voucher. He then asks Damien to give him a piggyback ride, and Damien responds that he'll do it if he gets paid for it. After a while, he's in front of a very emotional mayor, who can't believe the crown prince is leaving already. The mayor adds that Raquiel needs to rest before starting his journey. Raquiel brushes off the concern, while saying that he'll sleep in the horse carriage, which prompts a protest from the mayor, insisting that it's not comfortable. He concludes the conversation by praising and thanking the mayor for everything he's done for him. Then, he heads to his carriage, tossing an offer to the mayor to visit his clinic with Captain Roberto. The mayor doesn't understand, but Raquiel is referring to the fact that both he and Captain Roberto suffer from partial baldness, which he can treat. As soon as Raquiel enters the capital and his hometown, everyone is startled to see a minotaur accompanying him. A knight rushes toward his carriage, and as soon as he spots the minotaur beside the prince, he's a little startled at first, but he quickly shakes his head and moves forward. He wakes the crown prince and hands him an envelope sent by the emperor, after greeting him in a very formal manner. Raquiel takes the envelope from his hand, feeling a bad sense of foreboding about the content of the letter. He opens the envelope, his eyes shining with worried curiosity. This letter is a summon for him in the court of his father. He doesn't feel good after reading it. However, with a grin, he brushes off his worry by thinking that he's going to use the lie voucher in case things go south. Later, he's shown in front of his father, greeting him. He stays bowed while waiting impatiently for his father to say something. Finally, his father deems him worthy of wasting some words on him and expresses how irresponsible and incompetent his son is to endanger the people who are traveling with him. He doesn't like his father's words as he almost meets his end during that fiasco. His father then asks about the attack that happened at the mayor's residence, which he had confirmed. His father again reprimands him for not going to safety quickly, which led his bodyguards into a dangerous situation. He even has the nerve to tell our boy that he needed to take precautions before any kind of situation arises. All of his scolding and reprimands are making our dude quite irritated, especially since the situation was something he couldn't predict beforehand. After asking about his opinion, his father again reminds him of his incompetence, which endangered his companions. On the other side, our boy is quite upset about his father's inconsideration regarding his well-being. His father supplies with anger that how embarrassing it is for him to not protect 10 people who are with him when he is going to take the throne of that country and protect and care for millions of people in the empire in the future. Now Raquiel understands that what his father is making him understand is not wrong at all. Then his father instructs him to reflect on what he has told him, and he agrees to do so. At last, his father grants him to say something as well. Raquiel himself wants to have a two-way conversation with his father and asks him to quit smoking. He adds that he needs to be healthy because he has the burden of leading the country. After saying this, he smirks, thinking he has given his father a taste of his own medicine. Raquiel then adds that the prosperity of the imperial family depends on his health. At this moment, he thinks about the novel in which the emperor dies due to a heart attack caused by stress and smoking after the death of Rachiel. Later, it leads to the downfall of the empire. Most importantly, he doesn't want the emperor to have the same end as his own father. His father informs him that the day he first asked him to quit smoking, he did it. So, does he want to say anything else? Hearing this with a stunned expression, Rachiel says that he doesn't have anything else to say and asks for his leave. Just as he is about to leave, his father tells Rachiel not to eat the meat of summoned beasts, as it could harm his body. Later, when his son has left, the emperor thinks about his son with a soft expression, considering his concern for him. Then he asks someone about the pill Rachiel has developed. The person informs the emperor that they have used that information unit to spread the news about the Minotaur golden pills everywhere. He then asks about the result. The person informs him that the nobles living on the border are very curious about the pills, and might come to know more about it. The emperor is quite happy with this result. On the other side, our boy and Damien are heading back to the side palace, and Rachiel is counting his every step. Damien asks him about his purpose in doing so, and Rachiel tells him that he's just coming. Then, the next moment, a very crying and emotional Garden is seen rushing toward them. Our guy tries to stop him while jokingly asking his doctor whether he was this excited to see him. He complains in return that he left him for patience. Rachiel decides to prepare a tonic for him as a reward, and thanks him for his hard work in taking care of the patients in his absence. Then they discuss the incident at Cremo, and Garden is quite shocked to see the Minotaur behind him. Rachiel compliments his acting skills, because he might already know about him bringing a Minotaur with him. On the other hand, Damien is thinking awkwardly that no one is normal there. On the way to the entrance, he asks Garden if there's anything he doesn't know. Garden tells him about some strange inquiries where people are asking something about a medicine that doesn't exist yet. Garden has shown him the piles of those requests in which people want to buy the Minotaur pills, and the nobles are the most excited buyers. He then looks out the window to the people who are traveling there, eager to buy the medicine. His eyes shine to see them, and he asks Garden to make them line up according to their list. He is selling his special edition medicine. After 10 days, they have sold out all of the pills. When he's happy about it, Garden ruins his happiness by telling him that he's been summoned by the emperor. He anxiously thinks about what his father wants from him now. When the guards let him into another room of main palace, he is shocked to see that it's not an audience chamber, but might be the emperor's room. When he enters the room and sees the emperor, something falls in the pit of his stomach as he realizes that the emperor is in the same condition his father was. Rachiel's past self is seen in the internet cafe, where he is found playing a game which he is losing constantly. This is making him quite irritated. His friend tells him that his phone is ringing constantly, but he says that he doesn't care about it. When the game is over, he finally decides to pick up the call. As soon as he does so, his expression changes to dread. He rushes, his tone frantic, and can't hold himself together when he sees his father on his deathbed. In the present time, he tries to move past his trauma and see his father in this state. But there's no time to indulge in such things as he needs to treat the emperor. He diagnoses that the emperor might have had a stroke because his muscles and nerve signals, which control the muscles of the body, are all over the place. Then he turns to the emperor's doctor about his father's health condition. To his shock, the doctor informs him that the emperor has been fainting since the previous night. He asks about the cause of the problem. The doctor informs him that it was because the emperor was drunk the previous night after having dinner, so he suggested he take a rest. When he checked on him the next morning, the emperor was already in this state. This information makes Rachiel angry because the doctor lost the golden hour for treatment, during which he could have controlled the emperor's condition, which seems like the symptoms of a stroke. One thing he doesn't understand is why it happened in the first place, because the emperor claimed to him that he had quit smoking and was taking care of his health. He then thinks about the story development after the emperor's death, in which the second prince becomes the king. But now, it will be him who will become the emperor, who only has 200 days left to live. However, as emperor, he would have plenty of work to do, which doesn't allow him to treat patients, leading to his early death. He immediately tries to search for the cause of the stroke while hoping that it won't be because of cerebral hemorrhage. Basically, there are two types of strokes. One is caused by cerebral hemorrhage, which happens when a vein in the brain bursts. The other cause can be thrombosis and atherosclerosis, in which the aforementioned vein is blocked, which stops the oxygen from going to the brain. Cerebral hemorrhage has a higher chance of death. While diagnosing, he tensely hopes that it will not be a hemorrhage. Finally, a while ago, he confirms that it is ischemic, which is the lesser evil of the two. This condition paralyzes his father or makes him immobile, so now he needs to check which vein has been blocked. While checking his veins, he is petrified to see that one of the blood clots doesn't seem natural because he can't see the lines of Zahn. It increases his tension, as it's not natural to find such a clot there. He looks at his doctor suspiciously and decides to investigate this matter later, as he needs to further treat his father. For this purpose, he needs to move him to his clinic. At this moment, his thoughts are interrupted by the Archbishop. Rakiel introduces himself and asks whether his purpose is to be here to heal the Emperor. The Archbishop confirms it by adding that he is here to pray for him, but the Emperor's condition is quite critical for him to pray much needed. He then starts his divine power as the prince had allowed him. To see the effectivity of the divine power, he uses the acupoint scan skill and is shocked to see that the Emperor's cells are regenerating during this divine healing. He is glad to see that the cells are regenerating, as it is generally impossible to do so due to the damage of the brain cells. After finding the hope that he might save him, he starts to pray alongside the Archbishop. A while later, the Archbishop claims that he is done. He then checks his condition and states that even though the blood cells have regenerated, they will die down eventually because the blood clot has not been removed. Now his top priority is to remove that clot. He contemplates which treatment he should adopt to do so. The most dangerous would be reperfusion injury, which is a condition in which blood flow is resumed in a part of the body that previously had ischemia. In this condition, the part that has ischemia takes the most damage because it worsens cell recovery. After concluding something, he orders Roberto to bring the palace mage. He then asks whether the prince has lightning magic in his mind, which he declines. Before the captain even takes a sigh of relief, the prince exclaims that he is going to freeze the emperor. After a while, the palace mage stands in front of the tense prince and emperor's doctor. Upon knowing what their crazy prince wants him to do, he is quite shocked. The mage is hesitant and tense, knowing this could endanger him. But Rakiel seriously tells him that it's the same as what happened with George, so he needs to do it in order to save the emperor. Otherwise, his condition will worsen. To listen to him, he considers doing this but starts to suspect Rakiel, thinking he might be doing this in order to become emperor. But he brushes off this negative thought, as Rakiel doesn't seem like someone who would be after power. All he has been doing all this time is treating patients instead of indulging himself in politics. Upon contemplating the matter, he decides to trust him and follow his instructions. When he supplies this to Rakiel, he thanks him while summoning Goosebumps. After getting some thorns from him and a Minotaur golden pill in his other hand, all he needs is Sacred Blessings magic. For this purpose, he turns to the Archbishop and asks him to use Sacred Blessings magic again for the next 4 hours. But the Archbishop apologizes, while saying he can't do it because this kind of magic is only used once a month. Our boy regrets now, as he could have stopped the Archbishop from using it if he had known beforehand. So he asks him to teach him this magic. He is excited at the prospect of having this magic alongside his traditional medicine skills at his disposal, which will consequently help him gain more life bonus. On the other side, the Archbishop is quite excited to know that Rakiel wants to be a believer. He further explains that Rakiel needs to have faith and a sincere heart in order to acquire Sacred Blessings magic. After babbling about what Rakiel has to do, the Archbishop concludes that he needs to have faith for 30 years in order to learn the Sacred Blessings magic. Upon hearing this, Rakiel gives up the idea of learning this magic. Then he turns to his father in order to start the treatment. He makes his father sit down and starts his treatment because he needs to prevent the damage from reperfusion injury. So, he will start to decrease his metabolic rate as much as he can. That will help reduce the amount of sudden changes in the cells and minimize the structural cell damage caused by the injury. Therefore, they need to lower the emperor's body temperature for this purpose. This is called hypothermia therapy, in which he will freeze his father's body in a way that will drop his body temperature, resulting in a decrease in the metabolic rate in his body. After checking that his heart rate and breathing have slowed down as well, he orders the mage to maintain the current temperature. He then turns to the medicine, which is a liquid form of golden minotaur pills and the thorns left by Goseum. Now he will start removing the blood clot, but there is no room for making mistakes. He starts the treatment and checks that the clot is dissolving, but he needs to move to the next acupoint as soon as possible before the other side takes damage. Then he aims for the Chengoi point, which is an acupoint at the start of the pulse. It changes the energy and blood flow from the Chengoi point and spreads throughout the stomach meridian. Everyone is stupefied to see how he is treating his dad. Unfazed by everyone's tension, he concentrates on the treatment. Now, he checks patiently with his acupoint scan until his father's pulse is ready. He can see mana spreading throughout his father's body, but he needs the blood flow directed toward the anterior inferior cerebellar artery. If too much blood flows at once on top of the reperfusion injury, the damaged walls of the brain cells will definitely burst. To avoid such damage, he needs to proceed with extra caution. He does it one more time and detects small ripples of mana reaction. With that, he senses the blood flow slowing down to only 20%, which arouses hope in him. He has done his best, but now everything depends on the life force and fate of the Emperor. He just hopes it won't end like it did in his past life, when he lost his father. He yearns to hold his father's warm hand one last time after his death. He doesn't want such regret once again. His thoughts are interrupted by the feeble voice of his father, thanking him for his effort. He sadly realizes he's not his father's real son, but still, he wants to do his best. So, when the Emperor closes his eyes again, he wants him to rest without straining too much. He knows that he's at his own limit as well, so he steps outside to get some fresh air. On his way, a regret for not answering his father's call earlier also stirs in his heart. With a heavy heart, he feels content that, at least this time, he didn't repeat his past mistake. As it rains outside, he is crying for his father. After a good cry, he pulls himself together, knowing he's only passed one hurdle and needs to be prepared if there's another relapse. He decides to establish a rehabilitation plan if the Emperor faces more stress. Besides, he hopes his father will live at least 1 month longer, so he can use a sacred blessing magic to fully heal him. In this moment, his system informs him that, because of his unique treatment and dedication, he is now able to treat his father with the hope of further recovery. Not only this, but our guy also creates a record by introducing the concept of reperfusion injury to the Laurasia continent. After his discovery, this concept will be written for future generations of medical students. In this way, future medical students will resent him because they'll need to study for exams on this topic. Besides, he also obtains 121 GDP points. He feels glad to receive these unexpected rewards. His moment of contentment is interrupted by the royal doctor, who apologizes for his inability to treat the Emperor. Raquiel angrily orders the doctor's suspension because he fails to recognize the Emperor's condition and loses the golden hour due to his ignorance. So from now on, Raquiel will take care of his father himself. He then instructs his subordinates to stay close to his father since the doctor has proven incompetent. He orders them not to spread the news about the Emperor's health condition and tells them to stand by as the Emperor needs more rest. While looking at them, he thinks there are other reasons he can't trust them. The next morning, he wakes up to his subordinate approaching him and informing him that people outside the Emperor's room have somehow heard that the Emperor has caught a cold and is now resting. He thanks his subordinate, adding that he needs to complete his report. The subordinate then tells him that an envoy from the Amboise kingdom wants to meet the Emperor. He is flabbergasted to hear this news. Upon learning the news, he remembers what he reads in the novel. It is Amboise kingdom that leads to his imperial family's downfall. This kingdom, established for 150 years, grows stronger day by day and starts a great war in which his family will be caught up in the coming years. He doesn't understand the purpose of Amboise's envoy being there. His subordinate tells him that it is the Emperor who sends a summons to see that envoy 5 days ago. Hearing this, he concludes it must be because of Guinness. After expressing his suspicions to his subordinate, he is confirmed that it is indeed the case, as the Emperor wants this Guinness person to hold responsibility for what happens in Cremo. His subordinate suggests that he tell a little bit about the Emperor's health and send him back, which infuriates him. He sits down and contemplates the situation, realizing it won't look good if the envoy is sent back just because of a mere flu. People will talk and assume the Emperor's health is much worse. He needs to meet the envoy, as the situation could easily be exploited by the enemy country, which could wage war in the upcoming years. He deadpans that he is going to hold the meeting his way. The scene shifts to the guest room, where the envoy is having tea. This person is furious at Guinness, who caused such havoc at Cremo and endangered the life of the crown prince, a situation that could easily lead to war. Fortunately, he's no ordinary person, but a diplomacy expert. Skilled in negotiation, he's confident that he can handle any fault thrown his way. He's ready for anything. His daydream of meeting the Emperor is interrupted by the crown prince, who apologizes for being late. The envoy is baffled to see the crown prince instead of the Emperor. However, he needs to remain calm. Meanwhile, the prince plans to tackle this problem with a balanced approach, knowing he needs to be polite. He then asks the envoy to have a seat, while preparing to steer the meeting into his area of expertise and take control from there. He needs to avoid the war at all costs. So the meeting starts, and before the poor envoy can say anything, the crown prince immediately exclaims with a cringe-worthy fake expression that the envoy doesn't seem in good health. The prince asks him to extend his left hand. The diplomatic expert is totally baffled by this out-of-the-blue request. He extends his hand anyway, and Raquiel concludes that he has a heavy head when waking up in the morning. He babbles about other minor health issues of the diplomat, which makes the situation awkward, as the envoy wants him to release his hand and proceed with the meeting. However, while our guy is finding all these common health issues with the envoy, who understands what the crown prince is actually trying to do, but still finds himself getting trapped in his scheme, he needs to meet the Emperor as soon as possible. He thinks that he's there to show many negotiation cards to the Emperor, but the crown prince's talk is going nowhere. Finally finding no choice, he sternly reminds him that he is there to meet the Emperor. Our dude impishly thinks that this person is disillusioned if he believes he can steer the conversation, but he is determined. He starts to say that he is an important person, representing the Amboise kingdom, so how can they ignore the health issues of such a person? He says with fake sympathy that if the envoy loses consciousness during the meeting, it will ruin their reputation as an imperial family. He can't let that happen. He then steps closer and asks in a dangerous tone whether that should happen or not. And finding no choice, the envoy agrees with him. Raquiel gives him numbers of health advice, like quitting smoking and drinking and exercising for 30 minutes daily. At the end, he throws a bomb, while saying that after doing this, he could avoid ending up like an emperor. This revelation startles the envoy, who asks about the well-being of the emperor. The crown prince dramatically exaggerates how the emperor caught the flu because of the stress of managing the empire, which led him to increase the amount of smoking and drinking, and he ended up in bed. Now he's having a very hard time finding his appetite because of the flu. Upon hearing this, the envoy asks whether this is the reason the crown prince was sent here by him, which our dude confirms. He also adds that the emperor sends his apology for not attending the meeting and wants to rearrange it for a later time. To see the crown prince revealing all of this so honestly, the envoy concludes that he can't just find a fault. Besides, it was the crown prince himself who comes to apologize, who is very transparent with the situation. He understands the gravity of the situation, while knowing that he can't just lose higher hands if he doesn't accept the justification of the crown prince. While having a dilemma, he looks at the crown prince and concludes that he's not an ordinary person. In this moment, the crown prince whispers something in his ear and then shows him something, which prompts a remark from the envoy about his consideration. At the end, it seems like the crown prince has just said something to the envoy, which becomes the last nail in the coffin. The envoy is quite happy to have a letter to pass to his king and leaves the palace. Damien, who witnesses the situation, asks about his method of convincing the envoy. The crown prince casually replies that the envoy has seen his sincerity of heart, though his loyal bodyguard doesn't buy the excuse, knowing him too well. The crown prince then turns to Damien with an extra sweet and happy expression, and informs him that he's going to appoint him a super-secret operation. He tells him that he is going to admit the very important person in the traditional medicine clinic today. Damien is confused about which kind of patient can make him behave like this. He responds that it is the emperor, so he instructs him to go back to the side palace for this purpose. Damien asks whether he needs to ready his personal squad for emergency duty, which is met with an affirmative answer. Before moving ahead, he apologizes for interrupting Damien's training because of this new mission. But Damien shakes off his apology as his main priority is to protect the imperial family. Raquiel knows that after that fiasco at Cremo, Damien realized his weakness in the art of combat and has been training vigorously since then. He knows the time will come soon when he will be the strongest person in this world, but not yet. His thought is interrupted by Damien, who informs him that he is going to the side palace for the preparations. He nods and turns to the opposite side of him. While on his way, Damien contemplates his training, while knowing he is still not strong enough. His thoughts take a new path as he wonders what he will do once he surpasses his limits. On the other side, Raquiel prepares his father to be admitted to his clinic. He thinks that he can't let his father stay in a palace where he has doubts, as almost everyone seems to be scheming against the emperor. Besides, he needs to stay by his side to cure him until the archbishop is ready to perform the blessing magic. So, he has to move him because, if he stays there, people will suspect that the emperor might be seriously ill. While moving forward, he is evilly happy to begin preparations to receive another VIP patient in his clinic, knowing that the effects of his letter might show themselves soon. Meanwhile, in the Amboise kingdom, when someone informs the king about the arrival of Benjamin, he gets quite furious that he arrives that early, as it's not an easy feat to deal with the emperor. After greeting the king, Benjamin explains the situation in the Magentano, as he couldn't meet with the emperor, but with the crown prince. The scene flashes to the meeting of Benjamin with our guy, who tells him that the king should just be aware of the situation at Cremo. The envoy confirms that. So, the crown prince throws a bomb as he wants Princess Adeline to stay in their county for 6 months. This request totally infuriates the envoy, who assumes that our boy wants the princess to be held hostage in their country. He knows they aren't going to do his bidding, as they are a completely independent country rather than an empire's vassal state. Our boy grins, pleased to see his plan unfolding, as he has consumed a lie voucher. Now, he's lying about being interested in making a peaceful relationship with the Amboise kingdom. His system informs him that Benjamin will buy this lie, and now, Benjamin believes the crown prince might be taking a liking to their princess. He first dreads the thought of the princess living beside him for 6 months and falling in love with him as well. Then, he stops to contemplate the benefits of this situation, as it could lead to a powerful alliance through marriage. His greed accelerates to the extent that he wants to carve his name into history as someone who builds the foundation of a great empire, which will come as the result of the marriage between the Princess of Amboise and the Crown Prince of Magentano. He even daydreams of becoming the greatest diplomat in history. His daydream is broken by the angry voice of the King of Amboise, who shouts at him, while asking how he dares to suggest something so infuriating, treating their country as one of their vassal states by agreeing to give the princess as their hostage. He even asks his envoy how he could stand silently after listening to their absurd request. But Benjamin, on the other hand, who totally believes in the lies of our hero, explains that it's a good suggestion for both countries to have a peaceful relationship with each other. However, the king shouts at him to stop his babbling, as negotiations with Magentano are thrown in the bin after his meeting with the crown prince. Benjamin then asks him to read the letter from the crown prince before concluding anything. Now the king doesn't understand how, on Earth, his diplomat, who always remains neutral, is siding with Rachiel. As soon as he reads the letter, which might be enchanted by the lie voucher, he also agrees to send his daughter to Rachiel. He believes in the grand ambitions of our dude and summons his daughter there. Everyone is quite curious and nervous to see him suddenly acting like this. The king sits down on his throne while thinking about Rachiel, who is famous for being sick. But when he looks at the letter, he is quite pleased to see that Rachiel wants the hand of his daughter. Obviously, it's a lie fabricated with the lie voucher. As soon as Adeline hears she has to stay at the Magentano Empire, she finds this request totally unjust. She protests, asking how he can agree to such a request. The king starts to say that she assumes he made this decision in haste without giving it much thought, which is why she doesn't want to accept his decision. Seeing the letter in her father's hand, she understands that the letter must contain some kind of blackmail against him, as they might have found his weakness. Or it might be a threat. She really wants to know the content of that letter. The king again tries to console his daughter, saying that he is doing this for the good of their future, and one day she will be grateful for his decision. But the princess is not convinced. However, the king doesn't hear any of her protests, and asks her to move to Magentano from this moment for the next 6 months. The guards try to pull her toward the gate, but they can't because she is the smiling angel of Amboise. She earned this title not because of her kind and warm personality, but because of her great fighting skills. She starts to fight off the guards with a smiling face, which is a habit of hers. That is why she is called the smiling angel of her country. She crushes the guards into the wall and turns to her father, who is quite fearful of her now, along with his guards. But when she turns to her father, she finds herself trapped in a magical circle. The mages bind her with magical chains and cage her inside the carriage. This carriage is called the Dawn Horse Carriage, which will deliver the carriage to the destination by dawn. Yes, the princess's carriage is delivered at dawn, but after 10 days, her subordinate suggests she walk with her head held high as the Princess of Amboise, and she agrees with him, as she is not going to show any weakness. She looks ahead at our guy with an annoying expression, as she remembers seeing him as quite a sickly person. But he seems different now. Rachiel tries to welcome her warmly, but she introduces herself coldly without shaking his hand. He is disappointed to see this, as it always happens with him in Korea as well when women have no interest in him on blind dates. He shakes off that thought, as he has an important matter for now. He leads her to the dining table, where they settle down for breakfast. He tells her that he is going to show her the side palace where she is going to stay for the next 6 months. While thinking, he plans to use Adeline to prevent the war from happening. He recalls what he read in the novel about the war, where Adeline was a healthy and strong princess who was wise enough to lead her country peacefully. But no one knew how she died early, and someone from the distant relatives of the king took the throne. This person was greedy for more power and waged war with Magentano, which resulted in disaster. He needs to keep her alive and help her ascend the throne in order to prevent this war from happening at its root. As far as he had read the novel, she might have had the disease of biliary atresia because of her gallstones. He remembers that the author of the novel also had the same disease. Now he has a plan to treat her through medicine and surgery. He then apologizes to the princess for her as she has started eating, acknowledging that it must be difficult for her to digest the food after a long journey. So he presents her with the special tonic by Garden. However, she misunderstands the medicine as poison and is infuriated by this gesture. Afterwards, she bangs her fist on the table furiously and shouts, asking how dare they try to mock her like this. As a result of her banging on the table, it cracks all around the places. She further adds that it's not enough for him to bring her here against her will, as he starts to mock her as well. Rachiel supplies that he doesn't understand. She explains that, for her, coming here is a huge decision for both her and the kingdom, which shocks him. At the end, she exclaims that she will just stay there for 6 months as per his order, but she won't do any more of his bidding. He tries to make peace by saying that she misunderstands something, but she interjects that it's not the case. He pauses and challenges her, saying that she's afraid, which leaves her petrified. With an irritated expression, she tries to say something, but he cuts her off by saying that he hasn't done anything wrong besides offering her a meal and medicine for her fatigue. Then he doesn't understand her reason to be afraid to leave the table. She's getting angrier, but he continues, saying that if she's afraid of him poisoning her, he asks Garden to bring the tonic to him as well. While gulping down the tonic in one go, he dares her to think that he, as the prince of the empire, is fool enough to poison her during an official meeting. Then he starts his melodrama by saying that he understands she has been scared. He's playing a trick on her. Knowing that she despises people who are scared and hates being called one, she takes the bait and sits down in the chair while ordering Garden to bring the medicine. But she has a condition, as she will consume his medicine only once. He comments that first, she should have the medicine before making any decision. She looks at the tonic and thinks that, however she sees it, she only sees poison when looking at it. But she gathers courage and gulps the tonic in one go. It tastes awful. Then Raquiel offers her the candy, as is the tradition to have this after consuming the bitter medicine. He adds that it has a plum flavor. The princess salivates at the sight of the candy, but her pride stops her from taking it. She finally takes it, and the guy offers her the grape-flavored one as well. She feels like this sweet tastes like heaven, but she gathers her pride, stands up from her place, and adds that she's done with the medicine and dessert and would like to leave. He questions if she's going already. She retorts that there's any reason for her to stay there. He answers negatively, while adding that she will be guided to her room by the Lord Chamberlain. On her way to her chamber, she wishes that she does not want to see him during these 6 months. Later, Adeline is seen exercising with her knights, and is very happy with the results of today's exercise. When she turns to her knights, they all seem quite tired. She asks them why they're tired, because she doesn't feel any fatigue. Her knight answers that it's because they've traveled for 10 days, nothing else. His statement makes her think about why she's not feeling that fatigue at all, unlike her knights. Suddenly she realizes that it might be because of the tonic she had consumed, but she doesn't want to admit that it's the case. Suddenly, the children and old people going to a particular area of the side palace catch her eye. She assumes that they can't be the workers of the side palace. They look sick and are heading towards the direction of the crown prince. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she follows these patients to see what's the matter. Then she spots the crown prince, who is prescribing to the patient about his illness and telling them to avoid oily food and alcohol. He is giving the patients further instructions and heading in the same direction she is in. She immediately hides herself and sighs in relief as she is saved. But at this moment, Raquiel comes out of nowhere and asks her what her purpose is to be here. She doesn't understand what to say. He adds that this is the consultation room, and she needs to fill out the papers to be here. Then he seriously asks her whether she is lined up in the queue properly, but she doesn't understand anything which he is saying. He then seriously reveals that this is the place where they tend to their patients without any bias. So, she needs to follow protocols to get here, just like anyone else. Then he seriously orders her to start by filling out the consultation paper and wait in line. After 2 hours, she is in front of him, gathering as much indifference as she can while showing him the consultation paper. Our guy knows that she will do it. Meanwhile, she expresses that she is not some biased person who would abuse her authority. He expresses his delight that she is there, as he himself wanted her to be examined. She is confused to hear his statement. Then he finally turns to her and deadpans whether she has never been curious about the real reason he brought her here. This statement makes her think about his original reason for bringing her here, because she initially thought it was to humiliate her because of what happened in Cremo. On the other hand, he is quite smug to see that contemplative expression on her face, before he wants her to realize her symptoms by herself. In his imagination, he sees Garden telling Damien that he had a crazy overmoney kind of illness, which he had declined because he didn't find himself ill. But the next morning, he fell down in a pool of blood. So, it is necessary for her to realize the symptoms by herself, because if he approached the topic of treating her out of nowhere, she wouldn't cooperate. Then he deadpans that she will die in 2 years, which leaves a terrified expression on her face. She nervously tells him that it feels like he's cursing her, but he lies to her, saying that they know this truth because of the intelligence department of the imperial family, which knows everything, even about the royal family of Amboise. So, they detect the early symptoms of the serious illness in her that will cause her death. After listening to all of this nonsense, she is quite furious, as she was about to see him in a new light after witnessing how he treats patients. But she doesn't expect him to throw this kind of ridiculous joke at her. She shouts whether he is mocking her. He tries to reason with her, saying that his only intention is to treat her illness. To sense her doubt, he suggests that he will prove it to her. With that, he summons Bobok and asks if he is going to give it some task while adoring his summon. She, on the other hand, is quite shocked to see that he has summoned a monster. He then introduces both of them to each other, while adding to Adeline that Bobok analyzes the medicine at his clinic, but today it is going to perform a different task. Now he is going to perform an acupoint scan with the help of his summon. 3 days ago, he was lying on his bed while feeling quite exhausted because of his irregular sleep pattern. His large intestine was complaining and revolting against him, along with the other organs. They want him to have a good night's sleep. He informs his organs about the arrival of the princess in 3 days while wanting to express his concern. But they don't let him finish, as they think that he is going to propose to her. With the excitement of the expected wedding, the large intestine even grants him 1,000 HP. But as soon as he explains that he doesn't intend to marry her but wants to cure her, the intestine immediately wants a refund. He then blackmails them, while saying that if they want him to let them sleep, they should help him sort out his problem, as he wants the princess to realize her symptoms and believe that she is ill. After thinking for a while, his heart gives him a suggestion to level up his pulse reading skill. Liver explains that he could show her health report to the princess through the pulse reading skill. He doesn't understand how he can show it to her. He checks his pulse reading skill and finds 2,500 HP there as well. He can level up his skill by consuming his HP. He has purchased the next level, but after reading the description, he decides to level it up a little more. He keeps leveling up until he reaches level 10. By acquiring this skill, now he can not only read the pulse but also show it to his patient as well. Not only this, he has also unlocked another skill in which he can show the test results to the patient on the external screen. Back in the present, he shows the external screen, on which the image of the princess's gallbladder is displayed. She doesn't believe in him, so he tells her to press her stomach, and when she does so, there is movement in the picture. It makes her believe that it is indeed her gallbladder. He states that he understands, as it must be surprising for her to see her internal organ. But she is sad now, understanding the gravity of the situation she is in. Meanwhile, he explains to her that the gallstone inside her will eventually block her bile duct. In this way, the bile that's supposed to pass through her bile duct to her duodenum will go to her liver. From there, her liver, spleen, and pancreas will start to deteriorate. In the last, he deadpans that she needs to be treated to avoid this. She, however, asks him his reason for treating her. He explains that she is the master key to maintaining peace between the imperial and royal families, so he wishes her to become a queen and be healthy to lead her country. She then asks him his method of treatment if she agrees to it. At that, he is going to punch her, but she catches his hand in the middle and breaks it. He yells at her, saying that he was just going to show her his treatment method. She doesn't understand what kind of treatment method it is. He then punches his stomach and tells her that she has to do it. She doesn't understand how this treatment will work, as it seems like a plan to kill her. Unbeknownst to her doubt, he further asks whether she can discharge mana while punching herself, to which she answers affirmatively. He then starts to explain about the external impact wave, which is a kind of treatment he will be using to treat her gallstone. As she discharges mana from her fist, he will guide that mana with the help of Azrahan core technique. She doesn't understand what he is talking about. Rakiel, who has already practiced this technique with Damien, explains further that when she discharges mana toward her stomach, he will guide that mana directly to the gallstone inside her gallbladder. In this way, he can remove the gallstone from her gallbladder. She asks him to let her go after the treatment if he wants her to comply with the treatment, which he agrees to. She is shocked to see that he agrees to her demand so easily. He replies that once she is treated, he wouldn't have any reason to keep her there. On the other hand, she is stunned, as she had assumed she would be stuck there. Unbeknownst to her thoughts, he offers her to go to another consultation room as there is a crowd there. Inside the other room, he demands that the princess show her back to him so that he can examine the location and size of the gallstone, and she complies. After checking her up, he asks her to clench her fist and place it on her stomach. After doing this, it is time for her to hit her stomach. He asks her to shape her mana into a sharp needle when she is discharging it into her fist to her stomach. He asks whether she can focus on one point, which she answers affirmatively. She finally hits her stomach but is amazed to feel that it doesn't hurt at all, as it feels like the gallstone has gone from her stomach to somewhere else. Then he asks her to see the CT scan image of her gallbladder, where the gallstone is now cracked. He tells her that she is doing well, so she needs to do it again. After trying multiple times, he stops her as her gallstone has completely crumbled down. Rakiel, who is tired, still praises her for doing well, which brings a smile to her face. He then concludes the treatment, saying that the crumbled gallstone will be discharged from her body naturally. She is baffled to hear it, as she assumes that there is one more stone to break. But when she turns to him, he looks like a ghost. Now she realizes that the mana she discharged was absorbed by him. She shakes him vigorously while asking about his well-being. He tells her that he is fine while thinking that her mana is stronger than he expected. To see his condition, she asks his purpose for pushing himself to his limit. He weakly replies that it's because she is his patient. She doesn't understand, but he again emphasizes that as long as she is receiving the treatment, she will be his patient, which stuns her. Then he weakly adds that he needs to rest before he faints, while she tries to call for him. After a while, our guy is sleeping on his bed when Garden checks on him. He informs Adeline that he is alright, as he has neither a fever nor breathing problems. Adeline asks about the cause of him not waking up yet. He answers that it is because his body is naturally weak, and on top of that, he pushed it to its limit. She tries to apologize for it, but Garden shakes his head, adding that Raquel had told him in advance that he might faint, so she shouldn't think too much about it. Seeing her confused expression, he explains that it is a common occurrence for our guy to put others before himself. Garden also expresses his worry about his master in this regard. Listening to everything, her sharp edges soften as she realizes she was too shallow not to trust someone as good-hearted as Raquel. Seeing her response, his system informs him that, although his actions were purely selfish, his devotion deeply affects his patient's heart. Not only this, his act of sincerity and devotion will bring a positive change in the future, possibly referring to the prevention of war. Now he has formed a patient-doctor bond with Adeline, as she will no longer question her medical treatment in the future. With a soft expression, she holds his hand. Seeing this, his organs try to stop her, believing she is deceived by him. At the same time, his intestine grants him 1500 HP for his actions. Meanwhile, Garden also notices her holding Raquel's hand, and a green light appears above his head as a sign of a possible relationship between Adeline and Raquel. When Raquel is well rested, he meets her, and she immediately asks about his well-being. He answers that he was fine to begin with, and asks what he said before fainting. She tries to tease him, adding how emotional he became, while saying that she is now his patient. Embarrassed, he stops her from saying anything further. He then informs her that he will spend his afternoons treating her, as he has rested. He is also determined not to lose consciousness this time. She also expresses her trust in him, saying that if he says the gallstone needs to be removed, she will trust his judgment and treatment from now on. She thanks him afterward, which embarrasses him once again, as he did this for his own goals. Afterward, he is seen treating Adeline numerous times, using the Azrahan core technique to absorb the external mana impact. As a result, he not only levels up his Azrahan core but also expands his slots. After a few days, he successfully destroys 15 gallstones and looks like a carcass as a result. Now he is at level 6 in the Azrahan core technique, with 15 liters of space in his mana slot. He thanks her for her cooperation, mentioning that only one gallstone remains to be destroyed. He adds weakly that her mana impact is very powerful to begin with. She responds that she feels awful hearing this. He replies that she should be thankful to him instead. Hearing this, she misunderstands, as she is thinking that he wants a reward for his actions. But he clarifies that what he really wants is for her kingdom not to start a war with theirs. Hearing this, her expression changes, and he asks, why is that? She explains that she's never met anyone like him in her entire life. He doesn't understand her subtle meaning and takes his leave, as he has a patient to discharge. The said patient is none other than his father. They are in a separate room where he has also brought the Archbishop to perform sacred blessing magic. The next moment, after receiving the blessing, the Emperor sits up. He asks for a piece of paper, as he doesn't have much strength to speak. After reading the contents of the paper, he is completely stunned. The Emperor asks which date he chose to go with the princess, while mentioning that he heard about him visiting her while he was lying in bed. On the other side, the prince doesn't understand a thing his father is implying. His father reveals that he is talking about the Princess of Amboise. He starts to say that he doesn't know what he told the envoy of Amboise to convince him to send their princess here. But it is irresponsible on his part to proceed with the matter of marriage without any consultation when he is going to be emperor one day. Now our dude thinks about everything as how everyone in the palace looks at them and realizes that everyone assumes that there must be something going on between them. He contemplates this for a moment and concludes that bringing up the matter of a non-existent war would be an absurd idea. So he exclaims that the emperor is right about his mischief, as he has taken advantage of his condition by bringing the princess here, only for him to be rejected by her in the end. The emperor is furious to hear that he was rejected after going to such lengths, and he dramatically tells the archbishop to heal him again. On the other hand, our guy is trying to slip away before his father's lecture gets underway. Before he can get away, his father catches him and gives him a long lecture about his responsibilities as crown prince. Meanwhile, the emperor's subordinates notice that his right nostril is twitching slightly, meaning the scolding is just a pretense, which means that he is, in fact, proud of his son. Our boy just wants this drama to end since he isn't even the emperor's son to deserve such warm treatment. To wrap it up, he tells his father that he understands everything and now needs to take his leave, as his patient is waiting for him. The emperor allows him to go. Before leaving, he reminds his father again to be careful, mentioning that someone tried to kill him, so he needs to stay extra cautious, and the emperor agrees. Meanwhile, a knight from Amboise is rushing toward the Magentano Empire to inform the princess about the current situation in her country. Inside the side palace, our boy is complaining to his patient that he was beaten 500 times, which means that he always fainted from the force of Princess Adeline's mana during her treatment. On the other hand, she insisted on one more hit so they could finally finish this off. He agrees with her, and at last, he has guided her mana to destroy her gallstone. This time, finally they've done it. His system congratulates him on withstanding those 5-1 external mana shockwaves. As a result, he has awakened the Azrahan martial technique known as Indestructible. According to this technique, he can become indestructible for 5 minutes each day. His exhausted organs are thrilled to gain that skill and grant him 2200 HP. He then turns to the princess and informs her that she can't relax yet because her treatment isn't over. He realizes that if she developed a gallstone at such a young age, she could easily develop another one. He then asks Garden to bring Injinho decoction, which she needs to take consistently for 2 weeks. He also needs to check if her body will tolerate it well. At this moment, he gains a life bonus for successfully saving the princess's life. Beyond that, he has done it for peace, so she could ascend the throne and prevent war. He is happy, while thinking that he might finally enjoy a life of riches, but destiny seems determined to keep him on his toes. Just then, a messenger bursts through the door to inform him that Adeline received a message from her hometown. To their horror, he informs them that Jabilian, a cadet royal from the kingdom's western region, has declared rebellion against the country. That man believes the current royal family is weak, given they surrendered to the crown prince's absurd demand to send the princess there. Our boy is quite depressed to hear that this has happened despite all his efforts to prevent it. Meanwhile, the princess asks about the current situation. The messenger replies that the war has already started, and that the central army is trying to establish a defense at the Yahello fortress. As a result, more soldiers than expected are injured, with high casualties. Upon hearing this, the devilish side of our hero immediately feels excited to treat those injured soldiers as a way to extend his life. He even gains 100 HP for his wild idea from his organs. He knows that what's happened is beyond his control. The main thing he can do now is take advantage of the situation. With this thought, he turns to the princess and dramatically expresses his sorrow over the events in her country. He grants her permission to return to her homeland, but insists on going with her so he can heal the injured soldiers as the army doctor. Hearing his words, she thanks him sincerely, which embarrasses him. To shake off the feeling, he tells her to prepare for their departure. The scene shifts to the army camp, where a carriage has just stopped, and a very fat man steps out, while complaining about how shabby the place is. It is revealed that this chubby person is none other than our crown prince, Rachiel, who is missing the comfort of his luxurious carriage. Beside him stand his 2 trusted men, Damien and Garden. Garden still insists that he go back to his empire, but when he calls him Your Highness, Rachiel warns him to use his new identity by calling him Young Master Rihan. The scene flashes back to a few days earlier, when they had completed their preparations for departure. The princess sees Rachiel enter the room in the disguise of Rihan Belkin. When he tells her to move, she questions his identity, not recognizing him in his disguise. When he replies that he is the crown prince, she doesn't believe him and asks the guard to arrest him. He finally convinces her by reminding her about their treatment sessions, a detail known only to the 2 of them, and she immediately recognizes that he is indeed the crown prince. Gardan also comes up behind him, affirming to the princess that he is indeed the crown prince. Our guy reveals that this new identity is granted to him by his father. It is revealed that he goes to his father to ask for permission to go to Amboise. He informs him about the ongoing civil war in Amboise, and expresses his intention to infiltrate their military operation under the guise of a military doctor. The emperor asks him what he hopes to gain by helping Amboise soldiers. He answers that he can observe their military tactics, command structure, and administration, while staying in the safe zone as a doctor. Now the emperor's nostril is twitching, which is a clear sign of his pride for his son. He knows his father will allow him to go, as he truly enjoys putting his son to the test. He tells everything to the princess, while adding that he transformed his appearance with the help of the palace mage, which is only an illusion. She also checks his documents, which identify him as a fallen noble with medical training with top score. On their way to Amboise, Damien asks about the clinic that both Gardan and Rachiel are leaving behind. Garden informs him that Agnes is well trained to run the clinic for a few months, as they have spread the rumor that Rachiel is sick and needs rest. Noticing Damien's expression, Garden asks what's on his mind. He expresses concern about whether Agnes is receiving bonus pay for the extra duty hours, which makes Garden break into a sweat. Meanwhile, he's thinking that being a doctor isn't an easy feat. Finally, after a few days, they reach Amboise, and with Adeline's help, he is assigned to the rear camp for the wounded. Before heading to his duties, he hands Adeline the recipe for Injun Hotang and instructs her to take it regularly. When they enter the camp for the wounded, he's surprised to find no other medics besides himself. Afterwards, he's horrified by the condition of the soldiers. A man responsible for caring for the injured soldiers asks about their identity, as he assumes that they are superior officers. Rakil introduces himself as the military physician, but the caretaker shows ignorance regarding his arrival. He then asks the caretaker about the current situation of the camp, and the caretaker indifferently replies that everyone inside is dead. He even glances inside to see if anyone is alive. Hearing this, Rakiel demands an explanation. The caretaker, as heartless as he seems, explains that they need to make space for the next batch of injured soldiers, and the only way to do so is when the injured who occupy the camp die. He even complains about how bothersome it is to clear the bodies. Rakiel doesn't like this one bit, as there's no way he's getting any life bonus from this situation. So he asks the caretaker to bring him to the commander of the camp. Meanwhile, the said commander is enjoying wine in his luxury tent when someone suddenly tries to strike him. He luckily dodges the attack and turns to face his assailant. It turns out to be Damien and Rakiel. Damien asks if he should beat the man up. Rakiel responds to make it worth 2 months' salary without killing him. With that, Damien starts beating the commander constantly, while the commander tries to reason with them, and claiming that he is the head officer in charge of the camp. However, Rakiel reveals his documents, which states that he is an undercover royal inspector sent here to take the commander down.